All right, so is everything good with the view, do you think?
Yeah, we see you, we see the screen.
Wonderful, so everything's nice and legible. All right, well today what we're going to do is we're just going to do a demo on pretty much anything and everything that all roles would do within Encompass. Randy, one of the things that you mentioned was we'd like to see kind of a high-level overview start to finish. We're going to actually perform that. I'm going to bring our processing training manager, Strom, into the room for a couple items. Certain things, you know, I could draw docs, but I'd probably get it wrong. So we've got sales, we've got processing. So for the most part, I'm going to be running the applications, the credit. I'm going to show you data entry on how to do an application, how to do a number of different applications to include subordinations and mortgage insurance. We will be drawing docs, we will be submitting the loan. So basically, everything that an Encompass user would do, start to finish, we're going to cover. Now, Randy, you mentioned it would be a high-level overview, so we're not explaining why we do certain things. We're not going to pull up a preliminary title report and show you the lien priority. I mean, it doesn't seem like that's what you guys are interested in. You're concerned with what goes into Encompass, how are things generated, what does the typical user do, and that's really what we wanted to identify with this training.
Right.
Now, feel free to stop us and ask questions. If you guys do have questions, we've got a video audience as well, so please make sure to ask the question loudly, audibly, and we'll make sure I'll reiterate it and we'll answer it. But between Brady and myself, we'll be able to cover most anything, and any questions you come up with, we definitely welcome them. As I work through it, unfortunately I'm going to have to be sitting down, but I'll make sure to speak loud enough. And we're going to show you the entire application process. We're going to order services, we're going to lock a loan. I'm going to show you guys how to key in mortgage insurance, how to key in a subordination. There's a number of different types of loans that can be written, so we're going to go over each and every one of them. We'll show you the processing stage, the underwriting stage, and fortunately, since we'll be able to work with that alternate file, we should be able to do everything rather than simulate everything. So I'm going to get started on the demo. It's just going to be a whole lot of data entry, and as I mentioned, if you do have questions, please feel free to ask those questions.
Can we maximize that more to the screen?
Absolutely, yes. So let me go ahead and maximize that. How does that look a little bit better?
It's looking good.
All right, wonderful. So we're going to start with a relatively simple transaction. It's just going to be a primary residence loan. I'm going to walk through the agent portion, and I'll make sure to kind of identify who does what as we're doing it, so that way you guys know which role is responsible for it. So it all basically starts with a clean Encompass file. Our mortgage professionals utilize a system called Velocify, and Velocify will push leads over to Encompass. Now you guys know we only push leads to Encompass if we're actually going to run credit and perform an application for them. So we have a system built up where if no credit is ran, it automatically kicks it out of Encompass. We're going to go ahead and complete the app and run credit. So for this scenario, we have a test borrower, and I'm just going to go ahead and start with the data entry. We're going to go key in first and last name. Obviously, in order to run a credit report, we do need to key in a social security number. So this is all just going to be basic data entry. We do have a date of birth. We always make sure that we have the credit, social security number, and the date of birth accurate, as that's something that does register on the credit report. Agents are always required to input a phone number. We do need to have a phone number because we run a fraud report, and it's something that is looked up. Now, we will designate what marital status it is. In this case, we'll have an unmarried borrower. And in every circumstance, whenever a client has an email, we do have to list the email address. You guys know why we need an email address? To send out the borrower portal welcome email, to send out initial disclosures. In the event we do not have an email address, we're not really going to be able to perform an e-signing service for that client. So we've got our client name, typical data. We do have an email address. The email address is important. Below that, it's going to be the type of credit that we're pulling. Well, we never have to adjust any of these boxes. Every time we run credit, it's for the purpose of a mortgage inquiry, so there's no need to fill out any of these cells that you'll see right here. In addition to that, you'll see below it does show company information. Company information is not necessary, but some of our users do populate that form, and there's really no reason to or to not do it. It auto-populates Greenlight loans in the event we don't complete it ourselves. Now off to the right, you'll see we have Veritax information listed. Veritax is our provider for 4506 tax transcripts, and this will be auto-populated in every circumstance.
Just a question, is a co-borrower required for when it's a married person, or something like that?
So the question was, is a co-borrower going to be required if the individual is married? In most circumstances, you would have the co-borrower on there, but they are in no way required to be on the loan just because they are married.
Okay.
You'll find a lot of times borrowers, hey, I want to keep my wife off this property, or she has a credit issue, so we're just going to run it as me. So with our scenario borrower here, John Test J, he could very easily be married, and we'd never have to populate any co-borrower information. But we'll keep him single in this circumstance, so we will select that as unmarried. All right, so moving along, after the company information, you'll see we do have present address. Present address is important because this is going to be what the credit report reads. So we're going to key in 5000 Testing Street in Left Mount, California. Encompass, you guys know it's going to automatically search zip codes, and it will populate the city and the state and the county based off that zip code. Unfortunately, with our credit test, this is not a valid zip code, so it didn't automatically populate the county. Do you guys know how many years residency we need? How much history? It's actually 2 years. So in the event the client has not lived at the property for 2 years, we would have to input a previous address below. So if John had lived at 5000 Testing Street for 1 year only, we would have to complete the previous address section to build up the remaining 2 years. So in our scenario right here, we've got him. He's been there for 5 years, 0 months, and we will say that he owns the property. So we'll mark the own box. Now, previous address is not necessary, considering he's been there for 5 years. Now I've worked my way down to the credit information section. And let me just bounce back here. So back to the credit section, you'll see it right above that we do have a mailing address. In most circumstances, client's mailing address is similar to their present. So in an effort to be fast and easy, we could just check the same as present box. So now we have similar information. Below that, mortgage professionals are required to read the script that you do see here. They do have to read it verbatim. It's actually a federal requirement, it's compliance purposes, so they're going to read through this script verbatim, and then they're going to identify what we call the GMI, the government monitoring information. So in this circumstance, we'll say we have not Hispanic or Latino. We'll say we have a white male. So I'm going to go through and make the selections as not Hispanic or Latino, white male. Now, Encompass has a feature built in where if we do not collect this data, it will not allow us to order credit. We had a lot of circumstances where people would run credit, they see client has a 400 credit score, and they'd immediately kill off the application. Well, that's bad for government reporting, so we now have a requirement that they have to complete this government monitoring section. So we started at the top.
So if they check the I do not wish to furnish that stops it?
If they select I do not wish to furnish, it will automatically default to information not provided, information not provided, and not provided. The government allows for borrowers to decline to furnish that information. We go above and beyond and say, in an effort to monitor this, that, and the other, you're not required to furnish this information, but are encouraged to do so. So it's not a requirement that they provide that information, but it is a requirement that we run the script and ask the question. So Randy, to answer your question, if they do not wish to provide the information, the way that this is set up is sufficient for Encompass to allow you to proceed. So we'll change it on back to not Hispanic or Latino. We do have a white male, and now we have made that selection. Now, after the government monitoring information section, you'll see that we have the credit section. You guys know why we put the credit section below the GMI section? Get them to fill it out before we get to credit. So the streamlined borrower summary origination revised page, it was very well thought out. A lot of salespeople got together and kind of figured out what the best order was. So it does have that natural progression. Now in this circumstance, my order credit button is grayed out. I've provided the necessary information to run credit. I've got name, address, social security number, phone numbers, years at residence, but it's not allowing me to order credit.
The same.
Correct. The reason is because I have to designate that I have been authorized for credit, and I would need to save it. So you will notice up here on the top left section, there's a section entitled the log. And the log is just a natural progression of a file. You start with the file, you complete the application, you send it to processing, you would submit the loan to underwriting, you would then receive an underwriting approval. The borrower or the processor would then have to resubmit it back to underwriting. Underwriting needs to take another look at it to give you a final approval. We get docs out and then we fund the loan. Now in today's demo, we're going to work through each and every one of these milestones. So we'll cover those a little bit more in depth, but the log is the file's progression through the process, and the upfront user, which would be the mortgage professional, is tasked to complete the authorized for credit and then the application completed milestone. So now that I've received my credit authorization, I'm going to select authorized for credit in the log. Now authorized for credit is going to identify, it's just a simple worksheet, and in the event everything was done correctly, I would be able to select finished. Now I'm going to try and select finish, and unfortunately it's not going to work because I need to complete the required items prior to finishing the milestone. Encompass keeps it easy on us. They're going to show us all of the required fields right down here. Now the team is not selected because right now we're in the QA environment. In production environment, every mortgage professional is already assigned to a team. So the team would be auto-generated. The case number will be auto-generated. But the remaining items down here are going to need to be completed prior to completing this milestone. So I'm going to key it in right here. I can access everything right here. I can save everything right here. So to keep it easy, we just key it in right here. So we've got a $750,000 property value. Client will start with a we'll just say a $215,000 loan amount. In this circumstance, the client is looking for a 30-year fix, so I'm going to designate 360 months. It asks for a lender case number. You'll notice the case number has not been assigned yet. Let me try and hit save and we'll see if it go ahead and populates that for us. Okay. So now it has provided us with a loan number. I'm going to complete the remaining items. So we have 16 years in school. The term of the loan is also 360. And just to start, I'm just going to key in an interest rate. This is just an interest rate that I'm pulling out of the air. Right now I'm keying in 5%. The reason being is eventually I'm going to go to the pricer and I'm going to select the appropriate program and the appropriate rate. So that's just a placeholder. I've now completed my items. I'm going to select finished. So now that I've finished this milestone, you'll see it does identify the time and date at which it was completed. And you'll also identify that now this log milestone is bolded. Some of them are bolded, authorized for credit. The application completed has not been bolded yet. So I'm ready to run credit. I'm going to go back to my revised origination summary. This is where the page that the agent works off of. And now that I've completed my authorized for credit milestone, you guys will notice that I do now have the ability to actually order credit. So let's go ahead and order credit. We show two providers right here. The only one that we work with at this time is going to be Webstar CredStar. So we always make the same selection. Encompass is going to automatically pull the data that we've keyed in from the application. We've got John, Test J, we've got the social security number. It is identifying a new credit request and we are pulling all three bureaus. We don't need credit card information to actually run credit. We don't need to complete this information down here. So essentially everything we need to do on this page, Encompass has done for us. All I need to do is select Finish. So Encompass is now going to run the credit report. Fortunately, it is all integrated through Encompass, so it's a nice, easy transition. You just press the submit and finish button. And after we've received the credit report, it's going to present us with a copy of that credit report. So in my Services View tab, it's going to show the most recent service that I ran. Well, credit was the service that I ran, so here's the credit report. Had I ran automated underwriting, Services View is going to show me the automated underwriting. We've got a credit report here. We don't need to spend too much time reviewing it. We're not really here for that. To get back to the loan, I'm going to utilize this loan tab right up here. So I've ordered credit. You'll see that it has imported credit scores. It has identified the middle credit score. We use the middle credit score to price loans, to qualify loans. And in order to get the credit reference number to post, I'm going to import the liabilities. Now when we import liabilities, Encompass will identify which borrower. It's going to show you the scores that were pulled. It will show all of the liabilities that showed up on the credit report. And you'll notice right here, once we get to zero balance liabilities, it does not import it. We don't want to overwhelm the application with a bunch of liabilities that are no longer in effect. So it's only going to import liabilities with balances. The credit import feature also will identify any mortgage lates, so it will search a 2-year history for mortgage lates. It identifies the number of trade lines, and in the event your client had a bankruptcy or a foreclosure, it would identify those in these sections right here. So no BKs, no foreclosures. We are going to import the liabilities. Any questions so far?
I'm just curious, like for the testing purpose, can we use the same data and request for auto credit, or there's going to be a charge or something like that?
So what I've done right here is I'm utilizing a test credit. The question was, if we're in QA environment and we pull a credit report, are we going to be charged? If you ever use one of the CredStar test files, and I've got that, I can circulate it to you guys. There's 20 clients with names, addresses, date of birth, what have you. We do not get charged for those. So if you guys need to pull credit just for experience, utilize the credit test files. We definitely don't want to run credit on real human beings because there is an inquiry associated with that. So Randy, if you could follow up with me and say, could you provide me with
Sure.
that? I'll definitely shoot it over. The one that I've just ran is a test credit report, and it does look a little bit different. You'll see canned test files. They know it's fake. It's not a real borrower. ABC credit report. So it's national information that lenders can use, and I could provide it to you guys. But if you were to run a credit report on, let's say, myself, it would charge. So we've imported the liabilities. You guys will now notice that the credit reference number has been populated. So we have our credit reference number. I'm going to key in my property address. Now, we're going to be financing a primary residence. I've already keyed in that primary residence address, so I can select this button that says copy from present. And unfortunately, in this circumstance, it has only copied the address. So let me type in the remainder. The buttons that we have, copy from present, in production environment, it works. Everything works perfectly.
I know it's not working.
Oh,
It's not working right
it hasn't worked lately? Okay. Glad we got you guys in the room. So,
Good testing.
yeah, we're testing it right now. So, I do have to key in a little bit more information, but, what's another 30 seconds or so? County, we'll just say it is in San Diego County. This would normally be auto-populated on the basis of the zip code. However, the zip code is not a real zip code. Now below that, it's still asking about the subject property. So number of units would be 1 in this circumstance. We have a single family residence. The year built, borrowers don't commonly know that. So, we'll say, what decade was it built in? Oh, it was built in the 90s. So I'm going to say 1995. Agents will always complete that, but it may not always be accurate. Property type A. When you expand property type A, it's going to ask about the structure type. Is it a single-family detached? Is it a condominium? Do we have a manufactured house? Do we have a planned unit development? So we're going to say it's a detached single-family residence. Property type B is going to be in relation to the unit counts.
Could you just, I guess, explain? Detached just means it's not attached to another house or something.
Correct.
Okay.
Detached would be a freestanding structure. So a typical single-family residence would be a detached one unit. Another example, let's say we have 2 to 4 units. Well, if we've got a triplex, it makes sense that all 3 of those units would be together, correct?
That's correct.
Would you think that would be a detached residence or an attached residence?
Detached.
It's detached because the 3 units themselves may be combined, but the 3 units are not attached to a different property.
And it's considered one property, it's not.
Correct.
Okay, I see what you're
So
saying.
if you have 2 to 4 units, they are attached themselves, but we're talking about the entire structure which contains all those units, not the individual units. So detached one unit would be a single family residence. You can have a detached PUD. Detached condominiums do exist. They're far and few between, but detached 1 to 2 to 4 units, and if it's a condominium, we would say condominium, and then we would also right here say condominium. You can't have a 3-unit condominium. A condominium is a single unit. So number of options here, but for this one we will say detached one unit property. Now beneath that, we're still talking about the subject property. What year did you acquire it? I've seen in most part, people typically remember what year they purchased a property, and they usually will remember the original cost. So we'll key that information in. The existing lien section is going to be in regards to all the liens that are currently tied to the property. Now, data integrity is pretty important, so one of the things that we drive home to the mortgage professional is when completing the existing lien, we need to look at the liens on the property. So we scroll down and we see we have 2 mortgages here. And I need to add these numbers together. So I'm going to take out a calculator here. Here we have a calculator. I'm going to add these 2 numbers together. $249,908, first mortgage. $62,809, second mortgage. My combined lien figure should be $312,717. So I'm going to scroll back up, and I'm going to place that in the $312,717 in the existing lien section.
So just for educational purposes, a lien is any loans that are out currently, or is it?
Great question. Liens can actually be a number of items, but for the most part what we run into are going to be mortgage loans. Whether it's a first mortgage, whether it's a second mortgage, that would be a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan. First mortgages and second mortgages would count as liens. Now, other forms of liens could be a tax lien. In the event you have a client that didn't pay his taxes to the feds, they could apply a lien to the property for $30,000 of outstanding taxes. That lien has to be satisfied in some way. Title, it's all a matter of what liens are on a property. A lien is going to restrict you from selling that property. So if I had 2 liens from Countrywide on my property, my subject property here, I couldn't sell that property until I fixed the liens. Liens are a form of security for the lender. In addition to a government tax lien, you could have a construction or a contractor's lien. Let's say I had a pool put in my property, cost $40,000, but I only paid $10,000 of it. Well, the contractor could send me a number of letters, give me my 30 grand, give me my 30 grand, but if I don't respond to him, he can go down to the courthouse and get a judgment that says, Stephen Strom defaulted on this agreement, place a $30,000 contractor's lien against the property. So a lien is a form of security that hinders the owner from transferring the property until those liens are satisfied. Any other questions on liens?
So we're talking about this amount of money has to be mitigated before.
It has to be mitigated, correct. Now, we've got a first mortgage and a second mortgage on this property. The client can either pay off both mortgages, both liens, and replace it with a new lien, or they can pay off the first mortgage and they can ask that second mortgage lender to go behind the new mortgage. You guys know what that's called?
Subordinate, how's that?
It is called a subordination. So you'll see it is quite common, and I'm going to show you guys how we key in a subordination. But in a lot of circumstances, borrowers will only pay off the first lien, and then we ask the second lien holder to go behind our new mortgage lien.
So do they typically, the sales agent, whoever's the loan officer, on existing liens, would they take that into account when they're entering this number and only put the first lien?
In the event we have two liens, you're always going to have the combined lien number there. Because this is asking, how does it look in its current state? So let me show you guys something real quick, and then we'll scroll back up. So in this circumstance, we have a $250,000 first mortgage and a $62,000 second mortgage. If I wanted to pay off both of these loans, my combined lien amount's about $312,000. So I give a $313,000 loan. This new $313,000 loan would pay off these existing liens, and after those existing liens are gone, this would be the remaining lien. So the borrower had two mortgages, we consolidated them into one, now they only have one mortgage. The alternative is, client says, hey, I really like my second mortgage. I don't want to pay it off. So I would write a new loan for approximately $250,000, and I would ask the second mortgage lender, are you comfortable going behind my new mortgage? Now it's all about equity. Lenders lose money when they don't have equity protection. So do you guys think a second mortgage lender would have an issue with me paying off a $250,000 first mortgage with a $350,000 first mortgage?
I
don't
would.
think so.
Absolutely.
I don't think so.
The reason being is this lender has $62,000 lent out against the property. If I try and replace this new first lien with a lien that's $100,000 greater, the second mortgage lender has lost $100,000 of equity protection. They would shoot that request down. They'd say, I'm not comfortable going behind the new one because you're deteriorating my equity position. How about you give me $62,000 of that $100,000 and I'll go away. They don't like subordinating to cash out. Next question. The payment on this lien right here is $250,000, or for $250,000 is $1,490. If I offered a new loan that had a payment of $2,900, do you think the second mortgage lender might have an issue with that? The payment increases by $1,500?
Certainly.
They could, because borrowers get in a routine where they get used to making their payment. And if this payment were to shoot up by $1,400, that borrower may be able to make this payment, but what about the $594 payment to the second mortgage lender? So subordinations, they're willing to go behind a loan that betters the client's payment or the equity position. If the client makes a wealth of money, they may go behind a loan with a higher payment, but the considerations that are given is, are you eating up my equity position, and what are you doing to the existing payments? So we'll come back on that when we actually do the data entry. All right, so we're back up. Oh, question.
Yeah, coming to this loan origination right now, we're talking about refinance, or we're talking about the new loan?
So you're talking like, are we only going to go over refinances versus purchases?
No, it looks like you're going to a refinance process. Is it Encompass pretty much the more to do with refinance, or?
Encompass will do refinances and purchases. 95% of our business is going to be refinance, so that's what you see the most of.
Okay.
We don't have separate systems for purchases.
Okay.
Encompass will drive refinance, purchase, pretty much every loan program we write, Encompass has the capabilities to handle. All right, so we've got the subject property information completed. Legal description, not necessary at this point. This is something that the processors will fill in when they draw loan documents. So agents, they don't have the legal description when they write the loan. Right now, we just have a borrower on the phone. So they're going to say, why don't you take a look at the prelim? Beneath that, how are you holding title? Well, we're not attorneys. We can't advise clients, you should hold title joint tenancy. You should hold title tenancy in common. So agents are always going to say, to be decided in escrow. Let someone else figure it out. And we'll show you how we figure that out when we get to the processing piece. So who's going to be on title? We have John Test J. If John had a wife that wanted to be on title but not on the loan, we can add the wife right here and say, Susan will also be on title as well. We're going to keep it easy, so we'll take that off. We just have John Test J, and it's going to be decided in escrow. Now over here, estate will be held in. This is a rare occurrence. In some circumstances, people own properties on leased land. In the event the land's leased, they'd say it's a leasehold, but I'd say 99% of the business we write is owned land. It's not leased land. So that's almost always going to say fee simple, and this is almost always going to be blank. Leased land, you don't see it very, very often nowadays. The source of down payment, agents are going to say, is the client bringing money in from their checking or savings accounts? So they would select checking or savings if money is due at closing. In the event they were financing everything into the loan, a lot of times borrowers say, hey, I don't want to bring anything at closing. We're going to say equity on subject property. We are using your equity to cover the closing costs is essentially what this is saying. We'll say they're going to bring in money at closing. So checking and savings is where my down payment or my closing funds is coming from. You don't need an explanation, so we leave that blank. Now down here is where we get to the transaction details. So it's going to identify the product description. What type of loan is it? What's the purpose of the loan? Is it a purchase? Is it cash out? Is it no cash out? What is your occupancy? Is it primary? Is it secondary? Is it investment? Your loan type, is it a conventional loan? Is it an FHA loan? So it's going to identify really all of the loan characteristics right here, first lien versus second lien, fixed rate versus adjustable rate. The nice thing about this section is the pricer will populate all of this data for you. All of these items, for the most part, will affect pricing. You know, investment properties don't price as well as primary residences. Cash out loans don't price as well as no cash out. Conventional prices differently than FHA. So agents will not make their adjustments right here. They will make the adjustments in the pricer because we want to price the loans out correctly. And then the pricer will push all of that data on over and populate it correctly. So we're going to show you the pricer and how it does that, and we will come back to that. But this transaction details, the product description, the purpose, the other purpose, the occupancy, the amortization type, the loan type, is all going to be completed by our pricing system. So we'll scroll down because we're going to let the pricer do all that for us. Beneath the transaction details section, you'll see that there's purchase price and down payment. Do you guys remember when I filled out the original purchase price above? I mentioned a lot of times clients remember. The original cost of the property goes in original cost. Purchase price, this is only to be used if the loan is a purchase. So it's important that agents don't fill out a purchase price unless it's truly a purchase transaction. Down payment, same rules. If it's not a purchase, these must be left blank. If not, it complicates Encompass and it doesn't read the data correctly. So purchase price and down payment is for purchases only. Now my loan amount I have to set right here. Earlier, our combined liens we determined to be $312,000. So just to start, I'm going to say I want a $313,000 loan amount. The pricer, once again, will control all of this data after I go to the pricer. So right now I'm just going to key in a starting loan amount of $313,000. My interest rate, I can leave that the same. My term and when it's due, I'll leave that the same right now because we're going to let the pricer make those changes. Beneath that, it identifies the monthly payment. The monthly payment is going to say, what loan amount are you trying to give? What interest rate are you offering? And what term is the loan? So it's going to look at those features and it's going to make the calculation for you. So if I happen to change this interest rate, you'll notice that the monthly payment is going to change along with it. Do you guys know why we would have a qualifying rate? Has anyone ever seen a different note rate versus qualifying rate?
Depending on their credit.
Good guess. The reason would be is there's different loan types. There's a thing called an adjustable rate mortgage. Some of the adjustable rate mortgages will have a fixed period for 5 years. So they're going to say, hey, I'll give you this interest rate of 3%, but it's only for the first 5 years of the loan. After 5 years, it switches to an adjustable rate mortgage. Well, I'm offering a loan that's around for 30 years, and it's only got a fixed rate for 5 years. Could you see why lenders would be a little concerned about hanging their hat on a 3% interest rate when the rate could increase 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, 7 years down the road? Anytime you have an ARM that has a fixed period of 5 years or less, so that would be a 5-year ARM or a 3-year ARM, you have to qualify it at 2% higher. So you have a note rate of 3%, you have a qualifying rate of 5%. To reiterate, you only have a different qualifying rate for a 3-year ARM and a 5-year ARM. Any other program we offer, 7-year ARM, 10-year ARM, 30-year fixed, whatever the interest rate is what you qualify at. So note rate and qual rate in most circumstances are going to be the same. The time that it shouldn't be the same is if this says ARM and the product description says conforming 5-1 ARM or conforming 7-1 ARM. I'll show you how it looks in the pricer so you'll kind of be able to see that.
The 7-1 ARM, you keep the same,
Correct.
but the 3 and the 5,
Correct.
Okay.
So the tipping point is 5 versus 7. If you have a loan for a same rate for 7 years, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are going to say, hey, 7 years is a pretty long time. The client's probably going to refinance in the first 7 years anyways. So the 7-year and 10-year, same note rate as qual rate, and then any fixed product, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, it's always going to be the same. So monthly payments calculated based off term, note rate, and loan amount. Beneath that, you have the total payment. If you wanted to dive into it a little bit further, you could. No one really uses this button because it's covered in a lower section of this page. So we're not going to spend much time there because we'll look at it later. Now beneath that is our sub-financing section. So here we have our sub-financing. I'd like to complete the application before I show you guys sub-financing. So what I'm going to do right now is leave this out. We are going to pay off the subordinate financing with this application we're doing right now. The logic here is, if the loan is going to remain, if the second mortgage is going to remain, you have to key something in here. If you're paying off the first and second mortgage, it's not going to remain. We leave this blank. So we're going to pay off the first and second, so I'm going to leave all of this blank. We'll come back shortly and I'll show you how subordinates keyed in. Estimated closing date. So we've got our closing information. Greenlight, we currently close in about 35 days. So I'm going to say today's July 9th. I'm going to look forward 1 month. Hey, there's July 9th, but it takes us about 5 days on top of that. So I'm going to select August 15th as my close of escrow date. After my close of escrow date is selected, you guys will notice it auto-populates some information for me. Closing date, I've got my interest from date. The interest from date means what date will our new lender, Greenlight or NationStar, start charging interest. If I close your loan on the 15th, I as the lender have transferred money. The second I as the lender transfer money, you start paying interest on it. So your closing date and your interest from date should always be the exact same. It's going to say you're offering a $313,000 loan amount at a rate of 5% on a 30-year fixed. Encompass is going to calculate the daily interest. on these factors. The daily interest is $43. So if I fund your loan on August 15th and I start collecting interest from August 15th, you owe me 17 days worth of interest. That 17 days worth of interest covers August 15th to August 30th. Because that interest is paid at closing, you guys see how there's no September 1st payment? It says my first payment date is October 1st. Mortgages are paid in arrears, meaning the payment you make on September 1st covers the month of August. It's not like when you rent. When you rent a property, the August 1st pays for the month of August. When you own, September 1st pays for August. Well, I've already collected 17 days of interest for the month of August. For that reason, there is no September 1st payment. This is why people get to skip a mortgage payment when they do a refinance. So first payment date is always going to be not the next first of the month, but the following first of the month. So not September, we're going to October. All right. Below that we have employment information, so we're going to say John works at Greenlight Loans. We know the address to be 18200 Von Carmen. Do you guys know how many years employment history we have to put on the application? How many years residency do we have to put? 2 years, yes sir. 2 years is for residency and 2 years is for employment. So in this circumstance, we have to make sure that we have at least 2 years worth of information. Let's just say I've only worked here for 1 year. Anytime we need to add additional data, there's going to be a button that says Show All. So this says Show All Verification of Employment. I don't have the ability to say previous employment beneath this. So to key in additional employment, because I only have 1 year on the job, I hit Show All, and it's going to allow me to add a new employment. The plus sign always adds, whether we're adding an employment, whether we're adding an asset, adding a property, adding a document. This plus sign will always add whatever we're currently working on. So I'm going to add a new employment for the borrower. I'm going to say this was prior, because now he's working at Greenlight Loans. So before, let's just say I worked at Stearns Lending. Let's just make up an address. And let's see if it populates here. It does. So Irvine, California, 92612. 123 Main Street. I will key in a phone number. We do need a phone number. And then beneath that, I have to scroll down and identify when did you start and when did you stop with them. So in this case, we'll say they stopped in 01/01/2013. He's got 4 years on the job, 0 months, 13 years in the line of work. With Stearns, let's say he made $6,000. And now I've got current employment with Greenlight Loans. I've got prior employment with Stearns Lending. Borrower, if we had a co-borrower, I could change this to co-borrower, and now it would represent that that's for the co-borrower. But we only have a borrower, so we're going to switch it back. So now we've keyed in the employment history. If this individual was self-employed, we could check the self-employed box, but he's not, so we'll leave that unchecked. Beneath that is our income section. Now, income, it's important that agents key in the correct income, meaning if I was salaried and let's just say I made $10,000 a month, my base employment would be $10,000 a month. But in the event I made $7,000 salary and I got a bonus of $1,000 a month because I'm a hard worker and I also worked overtime, I would need to do $7,000 in base. I need to say I make $1,000 in bonus, and I would also say I work a few hours of overtime. It's important that income is broken out correctly because the way that we list our income affects our automated underwriting results. So if I just lumped it all together in base employment income, automated underwriting system would ask me for the wrong documentation. So you guys will see sometimes that you have income all broken out. It has to be that way because that gets us the correct automated underwriting findings. Now let's say we've got an individual who has some other form of income, whether it's Social Security income, maybe they have trust income, maybe they have capital gains income or alimony child support. Let's say that in this circumstance I have Social Security income. Monthly Social Security income of $1,200. Nothing's changed. You'll notice after I've keyed in $1,200, this still reads $8,500. The reason being is whenever we utilize this section, we have to designate, is it for the borrower or the co-borrower? So after I say this is for the borrower, it's going to lump that income in the other section, and now it's considering things properly. But if there's no B or no C, you get 0 credit for the income, and it's like it's not even there. So other forms of income can be entered with these drop downs. You just have to make sure that we designate B versus C. Any questions so far?
For underwriting, we need only for 2 years, right?
2 years, that's correct, sir. So 2 years history on income and employment, and 2 years on residency. So over to the right, we're going to have the monthly housing expense. We're going to identify what the current housing expense is and what the proposed housing expense is going to be. This is important that we get this information correct. So I need to scroll down to my liabilities. It says I have a $1,490 mortgage payment and a $594 mortgage payment. So $1,490 and $594. In my first mortgage section, I'm going to key in $1,490. That's my first mortgage. Do you guys remember the payment on the other financing? Was it $540? Let's see. We got to make sure we. Oh, $594. All right. I'm bad with numbers sometimes. So $594. I'm now going to identify what the client's hazard insurance works out to. So I'd ask the client, approximately, what do you pay? Okay, I pay about $1,100 a year. So I divide that by 12, and I'm going to say $91.67. I'll now ask the client, how much do you pay for property taxes? Oh, California property, my property taxes are expensive. I pay $5,000 a year. Okay, so we'll divide that by 12. $416.67. Now, property taxes and homeowners insurance typically will not change when we do a home loan. I'm just writing them a new loan. So the information that was before is going to remain. So now I'm going to say $91.67 in hazard because that's not changing. Real estate taxes, that's not changing either. Good news, Mr. Client. After writing you this loan and consolidating your first mortgage and your second mortgage, we're going to be able to lower your payment by approximately $404 a month. So this is the present housing expense. This is what it is currently set up as. How does it currently look today? The proposed is how is it going to look when we fund your loan? So this is the before and this is the after.
Could you just explain the different fields? Like I know you just said hazard insurance. That's homeowners insurance?
Correct.
Okay, and if you can just, like
Yeah.
the different ones.
Absolutely. Glad you brought that up. Now, there's a number of different types of insurances out there. There's the typical homeowners insurance that everyone has. Someone breaks into your house. Your house burns to the ground, things like that. Most properties, all single dwellings, will have homeowners insurance. Now, some properties, however, depending on what area you're in, may have additional forms of insurance, such as flood insurance. If we find that a property is in a flood zone, it's required that we have flood insurance. Let's say Florida. Florida's a prime example. Well, Florida, a lot of times they run into hurricanes, so there's going to be wind insurance. You may have earthquake insurance. So there's a number of different forms of insurance. You'll notice right here, I can't type anything in. It won't allow me. So to add additional forms of insurance, I have to go to another document called the HUD page 2. HUD page 2 is in our Forms tab. And within HUD page 2, and we're going to come back to this a little bit later and I'll show you, all this stuff right here. But within HUD page 2, there's a section that will identify the various taxes and the various types of insurance. So my flood insurance, for example, here is where I could say it's $78.92 a month. So now I've got flood insurance. I could also say, well, I don't have this set up yet, so I can't key that in yet. But the various forms of insurance we can add in right here, or processors and underwriters are going to go to this screen, aggregate escrow account, and it allows us to better identify who the provider is, pay to San Diego tax collector, pay to Allstate, flood insurance, maybe that's through Travelers. So processors will key in this section once the file gets to the processing. But here's where we can identify a number of forms of different insurance. We could say we've got $98.24 for earthquake insurance, Travelers, earthquake policy. So now it's starting to build the additional monthly payment that's associated with the loan. So within the proposed housing payment section, it will identify, there we go. It will identify the standard forms of homeowners insurance and property taxes you commonly see. But in the event there's a number of different forms, you have to adjust it on the aggregate escrow account section.
So these are impounds, right?
So impounds are slightly different than payments. What we list here is the payments that are associated with the property. Did you guys see me put car insurance on here? Well, does car insurance have anything to do with our property that we're financing?
No.
No, that's your automobile. So what we key in right here is insurance, taxes, and mortgages that are tied to the property that must be considered in the payment. To set up escrows, we use the HUD page 2, which we're going to come back to. So I'll show you how to set up an escrow account, but to kind of better explain things, this section is for debt to income ratio considerations and calculations. Anything that's associated with the property has to be disclosed here. Hazard insurance, real estate taxes, first mortgage, second mortgage, and then any additional insurances or taxing municipalities, whatever it may be, this gets considered in our debt ratios. To set up escrows, it's going to utilize this information, but we do it on a different page. So we'll come back to that and I'll show you how to key in escrows.
And just for informational purposes, I guess, the other two fields that we see there, mortgage insurance. So can you kind of give a brief description of what that is?
Absolutely. I'm actually going to price a scenario with mortgage insurance after we do this one. So
Okay.
if it's okay with you, we'll
Yeah.
come back to that.
Okay, and then the other one, HOA, Homeowners
Yeah.
Association?
So homeowners association dues we can definitely cover now.
Okay.
Oftentimes condominiums, and almost all condominiums, do have homeowner association dues. Nowadays we're seeing planned unit developments with homeowner association dues. So as I mentioned a moment ago, anything that is an obligation that's tied or associated with the property, I mean, homeowners associations don't just disappear, right? You pay $200 a month so it can maintain that HOA. The HOA is not just going to say one day, stop paying us money, we'll do it for free. So if there is an HOA associated with the property, we're going to find out what that amount is. We'll say it's $185. They're currently paying it, and they will continue to pay it. So HOA dues, if there are homeowners association dues associated with the property, it must be identified right here in the HOA dues section. Mortgage insurance, there's a little bit more to it, but the pricer populates it, so I will show you how that gets done.
HOA is for gated condominiums, townhouses, like if it's a gated,
Yeah, good
Community.
thought. So the question was, are HOAs typically for like gated communities, gated condominiums, gated planned
you
unit
have to pay
developments?
for their fees.
Exactly.
Now, it's not necessarily limited to just gated. I mean, so when a condominium complex is created, or even other kind of housing is created, it might be an association. So there might be some common properties, like a common clubhouse, a common pool, the landscaping that's done. So the association charges each resident a fee to belong to that association, and that's what this is.
Correct, and depending on the association, a lot of times they'll cover, entire community-wide rehabs. A lot of times people will pay $300 a month, and they're going to say, well, we've decided that we're going to paint all of these planned unit development properties. If there's enough money in that HOA account, there's no special assessment. But sometimes, maybe you got properties that are 20, 30 years old. Well, they're gonna repair the roofs on all of them because they all degrade at the same rate. So an HOA may say there's not enough money in the coffers. All of you residents, you have a special assessment of $13,000 that must be paid within the next year. We're redoing all the roofs.
So this could go.
It could,
Over the year.
yeah. You'll find that HOA dues often increase. They're primarily for maintenance of the common areas, such as pools, clubhouses, the landscaping. In the event you need to have a community-wide improvement process, rip up all the roads, sometimes special assessments are taxed out that they have to pay for. And lastly, I've seen where, let's say you've got 200 units in a condo complex. Well, if 30 of those were to go into default and 30 people were to be evicted, you now have 30 less people paying towards that HOA. If those properties are not sold quickly, sometimes when you have a carrying cost of 1 year that we have all these unowned units or the HOAs aren't being paid for, it causes the HOA dues to rise. So HOA dues will almost always go up because you have the attrition of defaults, and then most importantly you also have just cost of ownership is always going up. Whatever you own, it's more expensive to own. It's more expensive to repair buildings year after year. It's more expensive to maintain landscaping year after year. So HOA dues have an unfortunate tendency of constantly increasing.
And even after the 30 years you pay for it, let's say, it's still there.
Correct. So, if the mortgage was paid off after 30 years, property taxes don't go away and neither do HOA dues. Insurance, technically you can own your home free and clear and not have insurance, but that is risky
Good luck.
business. Yeah. Let's hope that home doesn't burn down. It's
Yeah.
expensive to rebuild.
Is it mandatory to have insurance?
Whenever we're writing a loan, obviously Encompass, we're writing a new loan, insurance is required. The logic there is, if my customer doesn't have property insurance, and I give them a $313,000 loan, I'm not just lending against the ground. I'm lending against the structure. You need a structure on top of land for the most part to live in it. So whenever financing is present, we require that there is at least 90 days worth of remaining homeowner's insurance. We don't want to write a $300,000 loan, have the property burned to the ground. Now the land is only worth $200,000. If the client didn't have insurance, all they have left is charred land. And now we've got a $300,000 loan out on land. We need to make sure the hazard insurance covers the replacement value of the property. So that's how processing will make that determination. The appraisal is going to say, in order to rebuild this property, sticks and bricks, not the land, but just the property, it's $211,000 to build a home. You have to have at least $211,000 worth of coverage. So sometimes if a client has a very cheap policy and we find that it's not sufficient to cover the replacement, we will tell them, unfortunately, you need to get more insurance and it's going to raise your monthly insurance by a little bit. So processors and underwriters will look at the insurance policy to make sure you have adequate coverage. So hazard insurance, various forms, HOA dues, they are always tied to the property. And if there's HOA dues associated, we must go ahead and identify them here. All right, now beneath that, this is one of the more important sections of the application. This is where we identify what properties do the clients own and which mortgages are tied to those properties. Now, do you guys remember earlier I had to add employment, previous employment? Do you guys remember which button I pressed?
VOE?
It was show all VOE. Well, right here, do you guys see it says show all VOM? Anytime we need to add something, we hit the show all button. So show all verification of mortgage. You guys remember how I add something?
Plus.
We use the plus sign. That's correct. So I want to add a new property, so I'm going to utilize the plus sign. What this is asking me now is which mortgage is tied to the property that you're going to tell me about. Well, my client has 2 mortgages tied to their property. So I'm going to check one, I'm going to check another. 2 mortgages are tied to this property. I'm now going to hit OK. Now that I've got my property to work with, you guys will see it has combined the balances here. Mortgage payments, it's going to identify what payments are associated, $1,490 and $594. It's going to do the math, and that's what we get. And since this is my subject property, I'm going to check the subject property button. It populates the address. The property is used as this is a primary residence, so I'll make that designation. All of this is required information. You must have a property address, you must designate the property usage, and you must have a balanced mortgage payment and value. Now beneath that is where we don't really need everything. So it's going to say property status. What is it? Is it S, PS, or R? S means the property is sold. We don't use that all that much. PS means that is pending sale. We don't see that all too often. R means rental. So if I've got a primary residence, I'm not selling it, it's not pending sale because I'm refinancing it, and it's not a rental, I'm not going to select anything. I'm going to leave that blank. The type of property is important. I have to identify it as a single family, or a condo, or a townhouse, or whatever it may be. So I'm going to say it's a single family. In the event this was a rental property, I would key in the rental income right there. It's not a rental property, so I'm going to leave it blank. And my taxes, insurance, and expenses, once again, I need to have good accurate data. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to say, what do I have tied to my property? What I have tied to it is going to be $61.74 for hazard. I've got $416.67 for taxes. I've got $185 for my homeowners association dues. And then I also have $177.16 of flood and earthquake coverage. Everything else amounts to $840.57. So the taxes, insurance, and expenses is going to be keyed in right here. So this primary residence is now set up correctly. It's got balance, it's got mortgage payment, it's designated as a primary, it's got the liens attached to it, it's listed as a single family, it's got taxes, insurance, and expenses identified. Job well done. Now, in the event this was an investment property, I'm going to show this just real quick. How do you guys think I would add an investment property? Plus sign?
No, property is used as...
Okay, well, this is my primary. I'm going to say
I see.
they own another property now. How do you think I'd add the other property?
From that plus sign.
Plus sign. Yes, sir. So the plus sign will always add. So, see it again. Which mortgage is tied to the property? That mortgage is. The address, 123 Anywhere Street. We'll say it is in Fountain Valley, California. So Fountain Valley, California. My property is used as an investment property. My balance, my payment. Let's say this home is worth $200,000. Property is a rental, so I'm going to select R for rental. Type of property, that's important, single family. Purchase price, date acquired, we never need to fill out here. That's always blank. Now, for my rental income, let's say I'm renting this property out at $1,200 a month. Let's say my taxes, insurance, my HOA dues, all that stuff amounts to $306 a month. What it's going to do now is it's going to say, you're making $1,200 a month. You're paying a $594 mortgage, and you're also paying $306 of expenses. You're bringing in $1,200, you're spending $900. $594 plus $306 is $900. You have positive rental income of $300 a month. So for rental properties, we have to call it an investment. We have to say that it's an R for rental. And then Encompass is going to take $1,200 minus the $594 minus the $306, and it's going to leave you with a net rental income figure. Now I'm going to delete this because we don't want this to remain, so we're going to delete it. And this one, we do have 2 mortgages, so I'm going to reassociate that mortgage to the property. So I've completed my verification of mortgage or my schedule of real estate owned. So now it's summarizing all of the data for all of the properties. So show all VOM, we have to go in and we have to associate mortgages, and then we have to complete the screen. Alright, so moving along. Show all VOD. VOD stands for verification of deposit. You guys see right here it says total bank deposits? If I need to add a bank account for a client, I'm going to expand show all VOD. Just like with the VOE, the verification of employment, and the VOM, verification of mortgage, if I want to add something new, I'm going to hit the plus sign. I have to say who owns it. The borrower owns it. The name, we'll just say it's Wells Fargo. Keeping it easy, I'm now going to say if it's a checking or a savings account, we'll say it's checking. I don't need to key in an account number. Account numbers are not important. Agents don't key them in. Processors don't key them in. It's not important. What is important is how much money do you have in the account? $9,821. I hit the plus sign to add it. I said, whose account is it? Which bank is it with? What's the account type? And what is the balance? It's now going to say you have $9,821 in your bank account.
Do you key in the account number also?
You do not need to key in the account number. So fortunately, account number, you can always leave that blank. Agents will leave it blank, processors, that will never be completed. Please don't key in bank accounts here. This is not the place for a bank account. This is a cash deposit on a purchase transaction. So this section, this cash deposit, is for purchase transactions only. If any of you guys ever bought a house, you had to put a little money down to secure the property. You know, give me 1%. Well, if you put $5,000 into escrow, that money is already in escrow. It's currently working for you in the details of transaction. It means you've already put $5,000 into escrow. We don't want to use this unless it's a purchase transaction because it muddies the water. So cash deposit for purchase only, this is where bank accounts go. Show all VOD is where bank accounts will go. In the event a client had a 401k, we'd put it in right here. So we've got a 401k. Automobile owned.
I'm sorry, the 401k, would that be like the total value? Because I see up there, it also talks about vested interest.
Good question. So we can qualify 60% of a 401k because if I wanted to go take money on my 401k today, you know, I'm in my early 30s, I'm not of retirement age, they're going to penalize me. They're going to say you got to pay tax on it, you got to pay a penalty on it. So we expect that they'll net about 60% of the total value. So if I had $100,000 in my 401k, I'm going to put $60,000 right here. Randy, you mentioned, I see up here we have vested interest in retirement funds. If I had a $100,000 401k, I could key it in up here. but that would hinder me from keying it in over here. The reason why we want it over here rather than the total figure up here is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have automated underwriting systems called DU and LP. DU and LP is going to say, how much liquid assets do you have? It helps borrowers qualify in some circumstances. If I key in that they've got $60,000 of liquid assets, DU really likes that. Like, hey, this guy's got 60 grand. Not only does he have money to make the payments, but he's shown the ability to save money. So the automated underwriting systems like liquid assets. If I don't have it over here, now it's just an asset. And Fannie Mae gives really no credit to assets. The reason being is if I wanted to pad my assets, I could say a 1990 Accord, that's worth $2,000. I could say I've got electronics at my house that's worth $5,000. I've got furniture worth Fannie Mae is not impressed by the furniture in my property, my electronics, and my 1990 Accord. So assets, total assets, do not help that much with qualification. It's better that you key them in as a liquid asset because that could help us qualify a loan. So this section, vested interest in retirement fund, net worth of business owned, you're not going to see this completed very often because the benefit that you get, Fannie Mae really gives no value to. And agents, mortgage professionals, if there's no value in doing it, they're not going to do it. They're I don't want to say lazy, but they keep it to a minimum and they only do what's required. So now we're in the liabilities section. We had two mortgages tied to the property, mortgage and mortgage. It identifies the payment and the months remaining. Anytime a mortgage is pulled through, it's coming through at 0 months. Freddie Mac Loan Prospector, that's one of those automated underwriting systems, it does not like seeing 0 months. So we always need to put a big number in front of it. Whether it's a 5, whether it's a 9, whether it's a 7, we need to have a figure greater than 10 months. Freddie Mac does not give consideration to any liability under 10 months. So if we left everything as a 0, Freddie Mac is going to give us an error message saying, why am I considering this debt that's going to be gone in 0 months? So agents will have to key in a big number. I say put 240 in front of it, and now we're set. Yes, sir?
What about the stocks? Even they are counted as
What about the stocks was the question. So let's say we've got someone who's invested in let's say they've got a heavy amount of mutual funds. Do you get penalized when you sell a mutual fund? Or a stock? If I own stock in IBM and
Fees, aren't there?
yeah, there's fees,
Set
but
up and-
it's not, we're going to take 30%,
Right.
so it's minimal. So if I've got mutual funds, I'm going to say who it's with. So I'm going to say, let's say a TD Ameritrade, and I'm going to use the full value because I can sell those stocks and I get the full amount. With a 401k, that's a true retirement account, and I'm not retired yet. If I was 68 years old and I could draw on my 401k without penalty, well, then I could use the entire amount. So you have a little bit of common sense that comes into play. It's when I use my percentages, it's can my client take from their 401k without penalty? If the answer is yes, they get full credit. If they're not of retirement age, in that circumstance, they only get 60%. So on a $100,000 balance, I would say 401k at 60% equals $60,000. Yes, sir.
all this information is keyed by the processor, right, or the loan officer?
Right now we're still at the loan officer. So loan officer, their task is to have an accurate and complete application because it drives everything else we do. So in this scenario, I'm writing a $313,000 loan because I want to pay off the first mortgage and I want to pay off the second mortgage. So we check those for payoff. They've been tied to the property, $312,000 on one property. And now we're saying I want to pay both of these loans off. All this other stuff, that's just something that's being considered for debt to income ratio considerations. I'm at 44%. If someone had to pay alimony or child support, you could say they have child support payments. The payment, let's say, is $750 or $45. And if the child is 10 years old, it's going to last for 8 more years. It's going to last for 96 months. You guys see how my debt ratios are now at 52%? It's because I've added a child support payment. So now we're back at 44. So alimony or child support is going to be keyed in right here. In this circumstance, we don't have any, so we'll leave it blank. Job-related expense is never used. We don't fill out that cell, so don't worry about that. And now, we're almost to the bottom, almost done with the agent data input. Now we're looking at our details of transaction. And the details of transaction is going to say, you're paying off $312,000 in loans. These 2 boxes I checked is what drives that number. So that number is gone now. But now that I check these boxes again, you'll notice that we now have $312,717. The prepaid items, remember that prorated interest August 15th forward? 17 days amounted to $738. I haven't priced my loan out yet. That's what I'm going to do now. But I want to make sure, where am I currently sitting at? I've got to pay $312,717 to the existing lenders. I know I've got $738 in prepaid items. That totals to $313,455. My client wants to, let's say they just want to finance everything into the loan. They don't want to pay anything out of pocket. Well, at this point, I need to ask my client, Mr. Client, do you like to pay your property taxes and insurance monthly with the mortgage? Do you want an impound account? For our scenario, we're going to say yes. The client wants an impound account because we want to show you how to do the data entry. If the client wants an impound account, I'm going to scroll back up to where that closing information was. Oops, I passed it. In the section that says closing information, there is a button that says aggregate setup. The aggregate setup is where we set up impound accounts. So if a loan has an impound account, oh no.
Uh-oh.
You know it's coming.
It is lost.
It's the loan number.
Everything you typed is lost now.
Yeah.
Once you close this loan, this is gone.
Everything from the credit should be saved, but that's all right. We'll get caught up here real quick. Test J. Yeah, that you guys know that issue. We've ran into it. So John Test J was one that I just created.
It's the, no. Put the loan number. I remember it if you want.
1110.
Yeah, I think it's.
There it is.
Yeah,
That's
first
it.
one.
Okay, so we shouldn't have lost too much. I can get caught up here very, very, very quickly. Just give me 1 second here. So we should be okay. Copy from present.
What was the issue?
Loan number.
BRDB is updating.
Oh.
Data sync is updating loan number.
Yeah, QA, sometimes it will leave off 1 digit of the loan number.
Okay.
So we didn't lose too much. 90700. See how fast we can type. Left mount, CA. County was, oops, San
Sorry, Steve,
Diego.
we should have given you a heads up.
That's
I
all
noticed
right.
it from the beginning.
I should have hit save a little bit earlier, but that's okay. I can do these things quickly. So we're going to say 1995, and property type is a 1 unit. It was purchased 2009, 500,000.
City is spelled wrong.
312,717. Left mount, almost there. That is to be decided in escrow. This client wants to finance everything in a loan, so we're going to say equity on subject property. This the pricer is going to control. This we set at August 15th, so we'll set that. Okay. We're just going to go back to 1 employer just to keep it fast and easy. Greenlight loans. $92612. Okay, and let's just make it easy. $10,000. This was $594. Import. Okay, so $1490. almost done. 1490. So we're going to say that the client is not currently impounding, but they will want to impound. So I'm going to set my numbers up right here. Okay, so we've got that. I didn't replace the HOA dues, we'll just leave that as is. I need to assign my mortgages to the property one more time, so we'll do that now. It is my subject property, it is a primary. And 416 plus 8167 was, let's just say it's $498. Close enough. And then lastly, it is a single family residence. Let's hit close. Alright, so asset, let me add that real quick. And now we are back at checking. So unfortunately sometimes QA, it doesn't, you know, we run into certain issues, but we're able to kind of adapt and fix. So now we're back to where we were. So I'm going to mark these as paid off. I do have to go back up to the aggregate section because now I'm going to set up my impound accounts. So this is only completed if the client wants a new impound account. Every circumstance except for the state of Arizona, we have to do 2-month cushion for taxes and 2 months for insurance. Arizona is the only state that doesn't allow for 2, they only allow for 1.
And could you, before you go any further, could you just explain more detail what an impound account does?
Correct. So, good question. So, impound accounts. When someone owns a property, depending on how much down payment they make, let's say I put 30% down on my property. Well, I've got a lot of equity, so it's my decision as the borrower. I could either pay my hazard insurance annually. In this case, we have an $81.67 monthly amount, so that works out to about $1,000 a year. I, as the borrower, can pay $1,000 once a year to cover my homeowner's insurance. The alternative is I can break it into a monthly figure and pay it each and every month with my mortgage payment. So for loans that have at least 20% equity, if you put 20% down, you have 20% equity, you don't have to impound, but you can choose to. So an impound account or an escrow account, as they're referred to, basically will allow a client to pay their taxes and insurance monthly with the mortgage. They pay it into an escrow account. They constantly put money in there each and every month. And then when the time comes to pay the full year's premium, enough money has accrued in those accounts to pay the homeowner's insurance. So some people, they're not good at budgeting. So they just say, I want to have a set amount I pay every single month. Lump all this together for me, I want to pay $1,652 a month. Or they're going to say, hey, I like holding on to my money and I'm good at budgeting. Let me pay my $1,154 payment each and every month, and then I'll pay the hazard insurance once a year as required. And California, for example, California, we pay them twice a year. So if this was a California loan, you have 2 installments a year, so we have to pay 6 months at a time. The client can either pay $2,500 to the taxing authority twice a year, or they could pay $416 a month into an escrow account. They constantly keep putting money into that escrow account, so when the bill comes due, there's enough money accrued to satisfy that payment.
And the customer with the impound accounts, they don't need to necessarily worry, I guess they're going to worry about it, but the escrow account, they take care of sending out the payment.
Absolutely.
So you just
You
make
just,
your monthly
you're
and
putting
you're done.
money in there every month. I'm putting money into an account controlled by the lender. The lender is going to send it out on a timely basis every time, because if they don't, guess who pays the late fee? The lender. You know, when an escrow account is set up, the borrower's responsibility is to pay into it every month. The lender's responsibility is to pay out as needed. So escrows, to keep it simple, it's, do you want to pay your taxes and insurance monthly with the mortgage, or do you want to pay them separately on your own? Now, loans that don't have a lot of equity, I mentioned you need 20% equity. An FHA loan, or a loan with a 10% equity, it's required that you have insurance and tax escrows. Lenders are always concerned with equity protection. They don't want someone to not pay their property taxes, because if someone doesn't pay their property taxes, they can the taxing authority can force a sale, and now the lender may be stuck with a loan that isn't enough. You know, it's too much of a loan amount for what they're receiving. So we're going to complete the escrows, and then we're going to take just a short break. I know we've been in here for about an hour, and breaks are good. So I'm going to complete the escrow section right now, and then we'll come back and we'll show you the remainder. So the escrow section is going to be found in the aggregate setup.
Let's save it.
There, okay, let's make sure we save it first. So we've saved it. Don't want to lose our place again.
You're fine.
All right, so aggregate setup. You guys remember how many months cushion we need? 2 months, yes sir. So 2 months for taxes, 2 months for insurance. Now, we've got a California loan. My first payment date is October 1st. Does anyone know when taxes are due in California?
It's like December and
It is December,
June, I think.
and it is April. So
April.
the
Close.
first due date is going to be December 1st, 2014. It's the first date after October 1st. The second due date is going to be, you guys will see, I've keyed in one due date, so it sees 12 months going out in December. But now that I'm going to key in a second due date, it's going to say, okay, you're paying taxes that have 2 installments. I'm going to have 6 months go out in December and 6 months go out in April. So that's what those numbers designate. Now insurance is going to be paid once a year. So insurance, we'll say it renews in, we'll say May of 2015. That is all you need to do to set up an escrow account. So the escrow account is nice and easy. Fill in your cushion, fill in the due dates, and then Encompass will do all the work for you. You hit OK. And now I'm going to go back to where I left off, which was my details of transaction section. You guys remember that number? It said estimated prepaid items. It was like $900. This is where I kind of start considering how much of a loan amount do I want. So I owe $312 in paying off loans. My prepaid items, which are my impound accounts and my daily interest, is that much. Collectively, I need at least $316,212. So that's where I start at. $316,212. I'm going to start my loan amount at $316,300. Now when I go back to my details of transaction, I'm pretty darn close to zero due at closing. I'll explain the significance when we come back from the break, but right now I've got a pretty decent start. I owe $316,452, $316,300. I need to complete my declaration questions. I would ask the client, are there any outstanding judgments against you? Have you declared bankruptcy or foreclosure? We go through and read these questions, and then we complete them. So yes, I do intend to occupy. Yes, I've owned a property in the past 3 years. It was a primary residence, and I owned it by myself. So these questions are standard. They're asked in every circumstance. And that is the end of the revised origination summary. So to close out the agent portion of the data entry, we work out the revised origination summary. We start all the way at the top, and we just slowly work our way down. We've worked our way to the bottom. We're going to take a break right now. Randy, do you want to do a 10 or a 15-minute break?
Whatever works for everybody. I don't care. 10?
Let's do 10. The sooner we come back, the sooner we finish. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 3:11, and I'll show you guys pricer, I'll show you mortgage insurance, I'll show you subordinations, and we'll go from there. All right, so we'll be back at 3:11. Sure. Then if we want, we can pause that. All right, looks good? All right, so what we've done up to now is we've completed the borrower summary origination revised page. The borrower summary revised page, I just call it the revised origination page. You can call it whatever you want, but it's a streamlined application. You start at the top, you work your way downwards. Now, we've built our loan we've already set up an escrow account, so we know how much you're going towards prepaid items. We know how much we have to pay off to the existing lender. I've got a good starting point at $316,300. I'm actually $150 short. my client said they don't want to bring in any money. So I'm going to raise my loan amount by $200 just as the kind of a reminder of where I'm starting. So I'm going to go to my loan amount, which is going to be identified right here. I'm going to change it to $316,500. I am now ready to go to the pricing system. So the pricing system, it's actually created by Greenlight, maintained by Greenlight. It's a Greenlight system. The pricing system can be accessed at the very, very top. You guys will see right here, it does identify launch pricing. We also have GLS. We don't really use GLS for much anymore. I'll show you the one thing we use that for later on, towards the end. And then we can also add and view comments. Agents, we do have to add comments. I'll show you that later when we originate the loan. But right now we want to go to the pricing system. So I'm going to select launch pricing. Pricing system is going to open up in a web page. In most circumstances, it's going to, there we go. Okay, no thanks. All right, back to business. So this one, just takes a moment. All right, so let me expand the pricer for you guys so we can see it a little bit better. See if I can zoom in a little bit more. All right, so the pricing system, we'll look at it and then we'll actually use it. So in the top section, it's going to identify the loan number, who the borrower is, city, state, zip, typical things. And here's where I start to structure my deal. So in our scenario, the client's paying off their first mortgage and a second mortgage. In the lending world, we call that a cash out loan because that second mortgage, they probably took cash out. So I'm going to change no cash out to read cash out. Cash out is what it sounds like. If I'm taking cash out of my property to spend on whatever or to pay off separate debts that isn't a first mortgage, it is a cash out loan. Now, if I was just paying off a first mortgage, let's say my first mortgage was $315,000, and I bumped up the loan amount by $1,500 to cover closing costs, prepaid items, whatever it may be, that's just paying off a first mortgage. So that's what we call a limited cash out, because it's limited to covering closing costs, or you can call it a no cash out. No cash out and limited cash out mean the exact same things. It just means you're only taking out enough money to cover the closing cost and the escrow deposit or the prorated interest. But in this scenario, we're paying off a first and second mortgage. So I'm going to identify it as a cash out loan. Now I already see a mistake, unfortunately. Right here, $249,908, where's my second mortgage? It's not showing it here. So now I need to go back to Encompass. I need to make a correction. Anytime we go to the launch pricing page, I don't want to say it freezes Encompass, but it opens up this option to click here for pricing changes to take effect. What this does is it essentially grabs the data from the pricer and carries it on over to Encompass. Now I haven't made any selections, I just saw that a mistake has been made. So I'm just going to close this out, and I'm going to click this to exit the file, because I need to exit the file and go back in. So we'll say no. So this one was John Test J, and it was 111102. Now the problem that the pricer had was because I didn't associate the mortgage with the property again, or I didn't mark it for payoff. So we're going to double check our file real quick. I need to make sure that one, I have it marked for payoff. So I've got them both marked for payoff, that's designated there. Now I need to make sure, do I have both properties assigned? It looks like it does, so I'm actually a little surprised that the pricer didn't pick that up correctly. So I've got both mortgages tied to it. I've got both mortgages marked for payoff. So we're going to try to go back to pricer one more time. And now it should read correctly. we're functioning out of the QA environment, and sometimes the QA environment just, everything doesn't work perfect.
Have we seen that before?
Every week.
Every week there's something new?
It's
It's
the,
never up and running.
the issue
Alright.
with the QA environment is, you know, we're a mortgage company, we're in the business of making money, not testing things. Testing things is something that has to happen, but our IT resources are primarily focused at maintaining the production environment because that's where the money comes
So
from.
in other words, we don't really care about QA.
Yeah,
Well, let's go home.
so, me as a sales trainer, I care deeply about QA, but sometimes we just work around problems. So let's all imagine that our second lien of $64,000 was listed here. It is marked for payoff, so fortunately it got that
And we
right.
can't manually enter anything in this
No,
plan, it's all grayed out?
It is hard-coded, but it's
Okay.
not going to negatively affect what we're doing here, fortunately. So
Okay.
I call it a cash-out loan. It is an owner-occupied residence, and it is a single-family residence. The D, well, that means detached. You got detached, attached. It's important that we get all of these metrics correct because most of this will affect pricing. If I didn't call it cash out, I'd price it incorrectly. Bad news. If I called it an investment, it'd price it incorrectly. So we make sure that everything looks good. Our client did want an impound account. You guys remember we set up the impound, so I'm going to check that box. And let's say the existing servicer is going to be NationStar. So I'm going to say it's NationStar Mortgage, and it is the same servicer. Now, the significance of this right here, we qualify loans a certain way. Same servicer deals have easier qualifying requirements than non-same servicer. So this selection is important because it determines how our underwriters will underwrite the loan. What else is important is two of these options say NSM, the other two don't. If we select NSM, it allows our NationStar clients to roll over their escrow account. And what that means is we had to put $3,000 into our new escrow account when we set it up. If the client had $2,800 in their old escrow account, by selecting this NSM, whether or not same servicer or same servicer, it's going to roll the $2,800 from the old account forward to the new account. The alternative is our client needs to finance $3,000 at closing, and they need to wait for a reimbursement check for what's in their current escrow account. Now, if I were to pose you guys with the choice today, hey, pay me $3,000 today and I'll send you a check for $2,800 2 weeks from now, or give me $200 today, which would you rather do? $200 today. You know, I don't want to pay you $3,000 just to wait for a $2,800 refund. For that reason, it's important that we properly select the existing servicer. If it has the NSM designation, with the disclosure package that's sent out, the escrow rollover authorization is released with it. So NSM same servicer versus not same servicer determines our underwriting theories. NSM versus non-NSM is, are we going to roll over an escrow account? So it's important that we do that. So current servicer is important. We've got our impound designated. The pricer is going to look at our state and zip code to determine the fees for title insurance, various state-specific fees, things like that. So it's going to look at the subject property address, and it is correct in the circumstance. Now, we can look at fixed rates and we can look at ARMs. Question?
Yeah, what about the loans already serviced by NSM and we're trying to do refinance again?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be NSM service only.
Correct. So the question was, if the existing loan's currently serviced by NationStar, all of our fundings go right back to NationStar. So if the loan is currently serviced by NSM, we're going to use one of two selections. And we're going to, in most circumstances, select NSM same servicer. There's reasons why we would select not same servicer, but we're not here talking about underwriting theory, so we don't really need to get into it. But if it's currently serviced by NSM, which is the bulk of our business, we would either select NSM same servicer or not same servicer. When it doesn't matter, we select NSM same servicer. So I remembered that I set my loan amount correctly. I had 300 and X amount of dollars of liens to be satisfied. I had prepaid items, and everything worked out to 316,500. The significance of getting that number to where you're very close to zero, this is where it starts to become more significant. I'll show you why. At 316,500, I've got $47 cash back to the client. Now that I'm in the pricing system, I'm ready to price my loan out. So I'm going to select Get Rates.
I have a question. Like there, I'm seeing that lock. It is 45. Like,
Okay.
can you explain what is the significance of?
Absolutely, great question. So the question was, I noticed that we have a lock option. And we'll see right here, it says 45, 30, 15, 60, 90, 120. We very recently opened up the selection to have multiple selections. Some of you guys may know that. What I'll train you off of is current policy. This policy will change. The policy is going to change to where agents can select varying lock terms. But for what Greenlight does, and I've been in these discussions, so I feel pretty strongly about what I'm about to say, is we are going to stick with 45 days and 60 days. 45 days is going to be for all loans. If it's a normal loan, 45 days is the lock term that we will use. The two circumstances where we would utilize a 60-day lock is if our loan has a subordination. If you guys remember, subordination is we've got a first mortgage and a second mortgage. We're paying off the first, but we're keeping the second. Well, you have to ask that second mortgage lender, are you comfortable going behind my new mortgage? It takes time for them to make that decision. That's why we go from 45 to 60 days. The other type of loan that gets 60-day lock is an FHA streamline. FHAs, you have to close them at the end of the month for various reasons. You don't have to, but you strongly should. So sometimes 45 days won't get you to the end of the next month. So a HARP loan, a standard conforming loan, the bulk of our loans are going to be 45 days. A streamline or a subordination will be 60. Currently, Encompass will look at the way your file was set up and it will make that determination. It's hard-coded. It won't let you choose. Just recently, you guys rolled this selection out it was like 2 Thursdays ago, you rolled it out in QA. In production, it's hard-coded to either 45 or 60.
Could you explain what a lock is?
Yeah.
Correct. So a rate lock. Rate lock is a pretty important thing for clients. You know, just like stocks and bonds, rates change daily. So you could buy IBM at X amount of dollars today, but we don't know what it's going to be tomorrow. The same thing goes with mortgages, because mortgages are by definition a financial product. So a rate lock is basically a lender stating to their servicing platform, or their investor as we'll call it, I've got John Test J. I'm talking to him today about a $316,000 loan. I'm going to offer him a rate and a closing cost. If my client says that sounds great, I'd like to move forward, well, I've sold them on an interest rate and a closing cost. You think that, I mean, they're making their decision based off what I'm offering them today. For that reason, if they say yes, they're saying yes to what I can offer today. I need to secure my rate offer with a rate lock. In the event I don't lock an interest rate, tomorrow's fees are going to be different. You know, if I offer you 4.5 at zero cost today and you say that sounds wonderful, I love it. Well, if it takes me 30 days to do your loan and I don't have a rate lock, 4.5 may cost $10,000 30 days from now. So a rate lock is us, Greenlight, saying to NationStar, I've got a client that wants to move forward with us in the terms I'm discussing today. Please secure these terms for 45 days. I've got 45 days to reach the finish line, to fund this loan. If I don't get it done in 45 days, I have to pay the lender more money to extend that commitment. So a rate lock is a lender's commitment to the borrower to say, I'm giving 45 days to fund this loan at the terms we discussed today.
Now, what if in, say, 15 days, rates get better, and the borrower says, you know what, I want the better rate.
Great question. So let's say we lock the loan, and I'll actually pull it up right now so we can use real numbers as an example. So we've got our scenario built. It's called cash out. I've got a good loan amount. I'm going to get my rates. So now I'm going to get my rates, and it's going to provide me with some options. I've got no cost options, 4.625 at $0 in fees. I've also got options with closing costs. So what my client right now wants a 30-year fix. So as a mortgage professional, I'm going to discuss this. I'm going to say, Mr. Client, I can offer you a rate of 4.625 with $0 in fees. Your monthly payment is going to be $1,627. Oh, and by the way, we're choosing to set up an impound account. So with the taxes and insurance that I've discussed with you, your combined payment will work out to $2,125. Now the pricer has some pretty nice features to it. You can hover over principal and interest and it does nothing. But when you hover over PITI, if you guys look to the left, it summarizes your principal, your interest, that gets lumped together. It shows your property taxes and your hazard insurance, and then it gives you a combined number. You selected impounds, this is your monthly payment obligation. You have to pay $2,125 every month. Now if my client says, hey, that seems a little high, why is that? I could hover over my interest rate and it's going to identify any pricing adjustments. So if a client were to have a bad credit score like 630, well, there would be a pricing adjustment and it would identify it in that menu that pops up. The borrower fees, well, you see right here it equals 0. If you hover over borrower fees, it identifies and itemizes every single borrower fee. And then you guys will notice in this section, it's going to offset things with the lender credit. So we've got lender fees, we've got appraisal fees, we've got title fees, escrow, sub-escrow, tax service, discount. You get an itemized fee schedule. You then have a lender credit that is going to eliminate all those fees. So Greenlight, we pay for the appraisal. We charge the appraisal $395, but we also say the lender paid fees is $395. So the number that you see right here is the end result of all of the costs offset by all of the credits. So it makes it nice for the agents, rather than having to do the math and say, well, all these fees minus the credit equals this. Encompass will do it for you. So Encompass, I now am looking at rates with closing costs. Here we have 4.5. It would cost $320 in fees to do the loan. So I'm going to say, hey, $320 to buy the rate down. $1,603 compared to $1,627. I saved $24 a month by selecting the lower rate. However, the lower rate cost me $320. If it saves $24 a month but it costs $320, it's going to take about 14 months of those savings to offset the cost. Does that make sense to you guys? On a loan with 360 payments? If it takes 14 months to break even, does that sound pretty good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when discussing this with the client, I'm going to say it makes a lot of sense to buy the rate down to $320 with this $320 in cost. It doesn't make sense to increase the fees by $2,500. So I'm going to select this price, but my client wants to bring in 0. How much should I increase the loan amount by?
320.
About $320. So Greenlight, we always use $100 increments. Now that I know I've got a loan that has $320 in fees, I'm going to increase my loan amount by $316. We'll say $800. We're going to increase it by $300 because I had a little bit of excess. I had like $44 cash back. So I've increased my loan amount. I've now repriced my loan, and I'm going to select this rate. This is the rate that the borrower wants, so now I'm going to select it. I'm about to come back to your float down question. Well, how do I go about floating down the rate? Let me select my rate first. So I've hit the selection option. I've selected the appropriate rate. Now what the pricing system is doing is it's populating all that data. Those borrower fees, the itemized fees, the lender credit. It's building that data right now. It's a lot of data, so sometimes it does take 10, 20 seconds, but after the data has been built, it's going to say the info has been saved. Finish your application completed to lock the loan. Now that I've built my data, I have to go back to Encompass, and at the very top, this red ink, that is what tells Encompass to go out there and grab that data. That's the simplest way I can explain it. The pricer populates the data, Encompass will now grab the data. Alright, so let's hope that sticked. Okay, so it looks like it did. So the question that was raised earlier is, what happens when John tests Jay, when the market gets better, and now he says, hey, I know the market got better, and I want the benefit of that. We have a thing called a pricing exception. A pricing exception is basically a way for us to ask for a discount on fees. You guys remember the approximate fees for the rate I selected?
The borrower fees?
$317, right? Well, let's say, remember the lower rate, it was like $2,900? Well, let's say the client called our competitor and they said, hey, I know you've locked me in at your rate of 4.5%, but I've got an offer of 4.375 at zero cost from a competitor. You're either going to lose my business or you have to give me what they're giving me. Match the offer because I don't want to start from scratch. So our scenario, we have them at 4.5, but our competitor is at 4.375. I need to reprice my loan. I need to find out how expensive that lower rate of 4.375 is. So right here, it's going to say 4.375 has $2,854 in fees. My competitor is offering zero cost. So what I have to do is I have to waive $2,854 in fees. $2,854.69. Over here, I'm going to key in the number, $2,854.69, so I don't forget it, is our pricing exception tool. People want less fees. They don't want to pay more for things. So you have to make sure that you have a minus sign. So I said minus $2,854.69. I'm going to select a reason, and I'm going to say, competitor offer. And I'm going to say in here, looking to match Loan Depot's competing offer. Now you guys will notice right here it says submit. I would hit the submit button to send that on out. However, I don't want to do that because it's going to go to our SVP and he's going to say denied. So I'm not going to hit the submit button. But imagine I did hit the submit button. If I hit the submit button, it would go to my manager, the mortgage professional's manager for approval. They would say yes or no. They get an email and it says, do you want to accept it or do you want to reject it? So they're going to say, I want to accept it. If this pricing exception had been approved, when I now go back to look at my rate stack, as we call it, if I hover over the borrower fees section, it would say somewhere right, maybe in this section, discount, it would say exception minus $2,854.69, and now you would be at zero. So you can't say give my client an 1/8% off rate. But you can say, to get my rate down an 1/8%, I need to waive $2,854 in fees.
But also the manager could change that in the HUD2 page of Encompass, right?
We advise that they don't. We don't want
Get it
anyone...
grabbed from pricer.
Yeah, we want the pricer to do that because when you start saying something's lender pay, sales managers can make mistakes too. Computer systems, typically they don't. So all exceptions, all discounts are driven by this tool right here. And we always adjust fees, we always put a minus sign, and then we're just going to say the reason. Processing delay. Okay, so who delayed it? Well, it was processing. Need exception to offset extension fee. And then I would submit it. So, it's gotta be a negative number, you gotta provide a reason, and then you have to explain the reason.
And what about the Greenlight loan interest rate changes within the 45 days? So would it automatically reprice it?
No. So if you lock a lock is a two-way street, I like to say. Borrowers, we ask them, do you want to lock the loan on the terms we discussed? They say yes. If the market gets worse, we as the lender can't call them and say, hey, the market got worse, I got to raise your interest rate. They're going to say, but that's what the rate lock was for. The alternative is true too. If a client calls us a week into it and says, hey, I know the market got better, we're supposed to try and sell them away from the pricing exception. I'd say, Mr. Client, I understand the market got better, but we did lock in the interest rate, and sometimes a rate lock kind of works against you, but what we've locked in is what we have protected, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to better your offer. Now if they
Go to someone.
if they say, hey, you're going to lose my business and I'm going to go somewhere else, I'm going to say, okay, I understand. We don't want to lose your business. Now you got us in a position. Any good faith estimate you get from a competitor, send it to me. I'll get you the exact same deal. I don't want to lose your business, but at the same time, I don't want to make it too easy to give you free money. Because when we lock a loan, we don't just cancel the lock and then lock it 10 days later when the market's better. Our investors, NationStar, doesn't tolerate that. They say, you lock the loan. It's not a one-way street. It's what you're taking today is what you're getting. So whenever we have to give something up, this means we're making $2,800 less on the deal.
Is there a policy? I'm just saying, there's some loans have some kind of policy where with changes like 0.25 automatically.
No. So we don't have any loan products or policies that says if the rate goes down by at least 0.25%, we have to give it up. It's more of a client-initiated request. The client's going to say, I feel the market's better, I want something better from you. Salespeople, we try and say, hey, you got a good deal as is, let's just stick with it, we're almost done. No, I'm going somewhere else unless you better my offer. I don't want to lose your deal, what do I got to give you to stay on board? Sales managers will then approve it. We don't want to start on a loan and not close a loan, it's counterproductive. So the pricing system, we've selected our previous price, and now, when I go back to my revised origination summary, I didn't lose any data, it's all still there, everything's still there. I now am going to look at my details of transaction and I'm going to say, did I get it right? I'm paying off $312 in loans, I've got $3,600 in prepaid items. My closing costs were $3,189, but weren't they a lower number? They were $300, right?
Yeah, 2008.
Yeah, so I selected so this one we've got $3,189 in closing costs. When you offset the $395 appraisal fee, you're going to be left with that $2,900 figure that was assigned.
But the 2,900 was for the 4.375 rate.
So this is one of those circumstances where QA has.
We messed up. Okay.
We'll try that. It's the QA environment. It's.
Okay.
We'll see if it posts this time, but yeah, we'll see if it says 4.375. Production environment is perfectly nailed down. It's just QA is not as maintained as we would love it to be. So we're still at 4.5. Let's see if it should show a lender credit to offset, but it doesn't seem to be appearing. Maybe it will on the second go around.
We didn't submit that point.
Did you select that price?
We selected the 4.5.
Yeah.
But there should be a closing cost paid by lender other to bring down that number. But that didn't seem to carry over. I think what it is whenever I select something, it says your credentials cannot be verified because I have a QA account and I have a production account, and it's confused. But that's okay. In this circumstance, this would read 0, considering there would have been a lender credit to offset all of these costs. But now I've completed my application. I'm now ready to order services and lock the loan. So I've kind of worked with the client. I've explained to them, this is the offer that's on the table. Are you interested in it? They say yes. I have to run a qualification to make sure they qualify. So in this services tab, this is where we request our underwriting. I want to underwrite the loan through Fannie Mae DU. So I went to the loan tab, or I said services, I said underwriting because I need to request automated underwriting. Underwriting is a service, so it's accessible in the services view up here. And I'm going to say submit to DU. Everything is nice and integrated. It's going to pull all of the data directly from all of the work that we've just done. This won't work for us because it's a test credit report. It's not real. But had we not got this user not authenticated error, we would have had our automated underwriting approval. So the process to order is very simple. Services, request underwriting. We want to run it through DU. And then I just need to hit submit to DU on ePass, and I would hit submit once more. We would then have our automated underwriting findings. So I've ran the automated underwriting by request underwriting. I now need to make sure I have a compliant loan, or it's compliant. So unfortunately, I don't have access to the compliance review. Compliance review is our Mavent system. Sometimes compliance review does not show up in the QA environment, so I can't show you compliance review right now, but we'll show it to you at a later stage when we come back and process. This happens sometimes. The way that you fix it is you basically exit the loan and re-enter it. Let's see if this one has it. Okay, so this one actually does have compliance review. So, Hagrock, this is the loan that I asked you if I could work with. To run Mavent, we go to Tools, we go to Compliance Review, and I have to hit the Preview button. Order and Preview, it seems like they do the same thing, but they do not. We always want to select Preview. Preview is going to look at the file in its current state. That's what we want to see. Okay, let me key that in. So I hit Preview. Mavent itself is going to look at the state, it's going to look at the loan officer, it's going to look at the borrower, it's going to look at the fees. Anything compliance related, Mavent is going to give consideration to. So I've hit Preview, and we're about to receive our findings. We don't need to spend too much time on this, but basically it's just going to say, is your APR too high? No, it's not. Do you have any strange loan features? No, you do not. Are you overcharging them? No, you're not. It looks at allowable fees, it looks at debt to income ratio thresholds, it looks at is your loan officer properly licensed, is the lender licensed. Once again, we have APR, we have fee items. Is your client on the disallowed persons list? Is he an international money launderer that we shouldn't be lending to? Pretty much it's a social security number, a fake number. Have you done the appropriate HMDA cells? Borrower John Test J has an invalid social security number. There's no geocode data for. It looks at the property, it looks at the borrower, it looks at the loan, and it looks at the lending institution. So basically it's just an overall compliance check. We're going to say that this one is perfectly compliant, so I've done that. My loan's compliant and it's qualified through underwriting, and my client is acceptable to the rate and price. It sounds like we have a deal that's ready to be locked. So as the agent, I now say my application is completed. This is the last step in the log that we have to complete. As an agent, we did credit report, we did the credit authorization, that's done. I'm now at application completed, and I'm going to say I am finished. Application completed. Now that I have done that milestone, I've completed that milestone, now when I go to the pricer, it's going to allow me to lock an interest rate and order services. The last time I selected a price, it said something like info saved, or application completed, order services. Well, I'm going to close this because we're going to go back to pricing. And now that Encompass sees that my application completed is done, the rate that I select is going to allow me to lock and order services if that's what the client wants. So here we have it again. I'm going to check it. Cash out, it's a single family detached. It is serviced by Nation Star. My loan amount was correct. I'm now going to hit Get Rates. I'm going to expand my rate stack again. I'm going to select the loan that the borrower wants. You guys will notice each and every line has its own select option. So that would select 4 1/4, that's 4.375, that's 4.5. I hit select.
What happens if the agent selects a different rate accidentally at that point?
So-
It goes through.
Good question. If you select a rate that's incorrect, after the rate selection is made, it gives you an option to reprice it. So we're gonna, after this kind of does the math right here, you're gonna see it either says order services or it says reprice.
Okay.
If
They don't see it, they miss it, and it goes through compliance.
So if in fact I selected the incorrect rate and I ordered services and locked the loan, I could come back to the pricer at a later time. I would still have access to all of the locked rates and prices for that program only. It's only for the program you lock. So I've selected a 30-year fix. It says info save, order services to enable locking. I want to order services. So we'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Order services goes a little bit faster.
Yeah.
QA.
Actually, no, this is not a QA.
Oh.
This is just an issue with the pricer. We'll try it again. QA, it's just not the best maintained with all the integrations. So let's say I selected order services. I hit order services. It's going to present me with an error right now, and I'm going to bounce back and assume that it went through. In the event the order services went through, this button would now say lock loan. So imagine that this now says lock loan. I would hit lock loan. And now I wouldn't get this error. It would then say loan has been locked. So after you lock the loan, it's going to say loan has been locked. I now would go back here to have all of that data apply on my file. So if that loan had been locked, this would now show something like this, where we now have a locked loan. You guys will see up here, right here, it says 12 days remaining. For the most part, locked loans are going to have 45 days. So let me clear this out and I'll kind of show you what you would see. Okay. Let me alter the view. Alright, so status 2. So over here we have lock requests. Let's see if we can find one that shows a little bit more. So this one's going to expire in 0 days. Today basically. These ones are not locked, and then you have everything between. Now, Hagop, I'm going to start working with the loan that you created a while back, as it will allow us to do more, because it's already done. So I've got a locked loan. I've selected my price for the client, I've locked the loan. I now need to do a couple of items. I need to send them the initial disclosures. Well, I've already built the file. I've done everything I need to do. I've set up my impound account. So let me make sure this impound account is still set up. Okay, so I've got a close of escrow date. I now need to check my HUD. My closing date is August 15th. My first payment date should not be September 1st. That's too soon. So I need to change this first payment date, absolutely, to October 1st. So I've got a correct first payment date. Encompass will automatically populate all this data based off what the pricing system said. So we've got our origination credit, we've got our appraisal fee, credit report, tax cert, flood cert. All these boxes are checked for us. We don't have to check any boxes. We just make sure it's all been keyed in. Okay, I've got my 17 days. I've got my interest from date, so we're good there. That reads $764. My escrows have not been set up, so let me set that up. Okay, so we've got 2 months cushion. We've got due dates. I'll now hit OK. And unfortunately, okay, so it's the dollar amount, that's why. So now that I've got my dollar amounts, my escrow is set up, and all my pricing data has been populated for me. So on HUD page 2, all I did was I checked that my first payment date and my closing date were accurate. I then looked at my interest from date to make sure it's accurate, and everything is now good with the HUD. The last thing I need to do before sending disclosures is I need to copy from HUD page 2. So this button, copy borrower column to GFE, this is going to marry all the data on my closing statement, all of this pricing data that the pricer built for us. Pressing this button is going to push it on over to the good faith estimate. Good faith estimate is one of the more important disclosures we send out. This button, I mean, you can really never press it enough times, but anytime disclosures are sent, we press this button. This way our good faith estimate now shows the correct closing costs, it shows the correct interest rate, it shows the correct dates, the correct lender credit. It marries the data from the HUD to the good faith estimate. So I've got accurate disclosures now and I'm ready to send them. Let's see. So, Hagrop, you have access to your email on your phone?
Yes.
Okay, so let me make sure I get your email address correct. So it's HGHAZARIAN
Yes.
at greenlightloans.com. For any borrower, and we only have one, we need to have an email address assigned. So I've assigned an email address. There's no co-borrower, so I don't need a co-borrower email address. I'm now ready to send my DocMagic disclosures. So here we have a page called DocMagic. I'm going to select a plan code. Plan code is pretty easy to choose. It kind of tracks when is the application date? Have you sent out a truth in lending form? If so, what's the date and time? Have you sent out a good faith estimate? If so, what's the date and time? What was the last APR and finance charge you put out? Well, I haven't disclosed yet, which is why this is all blank. I have to select a plan code. So I'm going to key in my password here. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to hit login. Now we're doing a conforming no-cost 30-year fixed. It says so right here. So I'd like you guys to guess which program you choose.
That is fixed
All
loan.
fixed
All
loans?
fixed loan.
All fixed loans. Should we select FHA fixed rate? No, it's not an FHA. So fortunately, we're not overwhelmed with options where there's a whole bunch of different 5-year ARMs, 7-year ARMs, 3-year ARMs, 10 years. You're either doing a 3, 5, 7, or 10-year ARM, you're doing an all-fixed conventional loan, or you're doing an FHA fixed rate. 50A6, that's a Texas cash out loan, those come and go, but for this loan, no cost 30-year fixed, I want all fixed loans. I'm going to hit select. I'm now going to say I want to send out initial disclosures. So I'm sending out initial disclosures. I'm going to select audit. So DocMagic is now going to create the disclosures based off the Encompass file. Everything with DocMagic, everything with Maven, everything with automated underwriting is integrated. It pulls data from Encompass, and for that reason, it's important that everything is, not perfect, but accurate, because Encompass is driving all of the other services. Yes, sir?
I'm a bit confused about, you said after pricing, then we do order services. What does order services exactly do?
Okay, so the question was, what does order services do? Order services is going to order the title report, the preliminary title report.
GLS order service.
Correct. Now, it doesn't order the appraisal. The appraisal is ordered when the loan is submitted, and I'll kind of show you guys that when we get to that step, but good question. Ordering services sends a request to our title provider. saying, I want a preliminary title report, this client's ready to move forward. Our reporting, a lot of our sales reporting is based off how many order services did you do as an agent, how many loans did you lock, how much new business did you create, and then the other component is how much of that business did you actually submit into process. So ordering services orders the title report, and it also allows us to lock the interest rate, which is one of the important metrics that we keep track of as a company. You know, we're a sales call center, so how much new business did you create today? Order services and locking loans is one of the more important metrics.
And coming to Mavent, it's going to go through underwriting, right?
So you're saying, do we have to go underwriting before Mavent? Or
My question is like, at what stage we do that
do the underwriting?
for the Mavent?
Okay, so we would do Mavent before locking the loan. Reason being is Mavent is going to look at our loan scenario, it's going to look at our pricing and make sure it's compliant. So we first price the loan. Now that we have a valid interest rate and closing cost combo, we're going to run the automated underwriting because we need to make sure the client qualifies. You know, if they don't qualify, there's no loan. So we price the loan so we know what rate and fees we have. We now have a correct rate so we can run underwriting and qualify them off the correct structure. We get an underwriting pass. We then send it to Mavent because we need to make sure it's a compliant deal. If Mavent gives us the thumbs up, we now order services and lock the loan. I actually have a job aid that shows that progression. I'll kick it on over to you, Randy, so we can circulate it to the team. But it will show the step-by-step process that an agent would make. It is a Visio, so it's a nice, easy to follow Visio drawing. So Randy, if you can ask me for that, I'll definitely send it over. So we've created our set of initial disclosures, and Doc Magic is going to say, hey, I've got a couple things that kind of concern me.
There are actually some warnings that like, what kind of audit basically
So the question was, what type of warnings what type of warnings would Doc Magic generate, or what type of warnings would Encompass generate? Or both?
like we click that audit, right? Because we have to do audit. Like why basically audit is necessary here?
Okay, so audit is necessary. It's actually a redundancy. Because what Doc Magic is looking at here, what this Doc Magic audit is looking at, is very, very similar to what Mavent looks at. In most circumstances, they line up perfectly. But why we have the redundancy is Doc Magic and Mavent are separate systems, and they're both protecting against the same thing. So Doc Magic is going to say, well, as a service provider, I need to make sure that my service users are not disclosing incorrectly or disclosing deals that shouldn't be. Well, Mavent doesn't know that we use Doc Magic, and Doc Magic doesn't know that we use Mavent. We have to run Mavent because Mavent will consider things that Doc Magic doesn't. So Mavent considers more, so we have to run Mavent. Doc Magic is just an automatic thing that happens every time. So Doc Magic is forced because you can't skip the audit. And it is a redundancy, and it looks at similar things to Mavent, but not everything that Mavent looks at. So Mavent's a little bit more comprehensive. Doc Magic audit is unavoidable, and that's why both of them happen.
We have to do it. We can't skip.
Correct. We do have to do them both. So Doc Magic is saying some certain things. Well, pass, 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 pass. I don't even need to look at that. It passed it. Warning. Rate set date is missing. Rate set date, no big deal. I've locked the loan. This loan does not meet qualified mortgage general guidelines. Well, I ran automated underwriting. I did my job as the agent. I'm overlooking that. DTI exceeds 43%. My automated underwriting says it's okay, so that supersedes it. So these warnings are going to be very common. Mortgage professionals are going to understand that rate sets are not important. They're going to understand that, hey, my borrower DTI can exceed 43% because I have an AUS approval. So they're going to look at these warnings and say, you know what, I'm okay with that. If something says fatal, well, fatal's a problem. You won't be able to order docs if there's a fatal error. But warnings, it's on the mortgage professional to look at them and say, these don't concern me. I'm a licensed professional. I know it. I'm okay. So I'm going to hit order docs. All right, so we order the docs. DocMagic is now building all of those disclosures, and it's going to identify them all right here. Now, Hagot, this is where I'd like your help. If you could turn on your phone and have your email open and ready to go, we're going to find out how long it takes for the signing request to get to the borrower, because I've got your email listed as the borrower. So I'll tell you when we actually pull the trigger, and you can tell me how quickly it happens. These are all the disclosures that are going out. I want to have them emailed for e-signing, so I'm always going to select email. It's going to say, what do you want to do with it? Well, I want to send it out for e-signing. You'll notice it automatically populates the email address. And I need my client to be able to sign it, so I need to check this box. Every time we send initial disclosures, you have to check both of these boxes. If you don't check both of them, your signing won't work. Alright, so you ready? Okay, so I'm going to hit send. Let's see how quickly you get your signing request. You're going to get an email that says, important documents from Greenlight Loans.
20 seconds.
So it's 4:05 p.m. Let's see if you've got it yet.
Yep.
So
Yep.
DocMagic is incredibly fast. The second it says e-sign successful, the request goes out. It hit his email probably within 15 seconds. It also sends a signing request to the loan officer on the file. Loan officers will have to sign their disclosures. I'll show you why here shortly. And are you guys done with your day at 4:30?
Not quite.
Okay.
Me and the non-gun.
So I'll show you one last thing, and then we'll wrap it up for the day, and then Randy, you and I can determine when
next
part
piece.
2 happens.
Sure.
Fortunately, what we've done is the bulk of the work today.
Mhm.
Processing, underwriting, and funding we're going to go through a little bit faster, but with all of you, you guys are kind of creating files, and Randy, I think you mentioned it's more about building scenarios, testing scenarios. So in that case, what we've covered today is the meat of it, but you'll also want to see the back end. So now that I have sent disclosures, if we go to DocMagic, you guys will notice that it now is going to track that I've sent out a truth in lending. So it's going to identify that a truth in lending has been set, a GFE has been set. It timestamps it and date stamps it. And now, when I go back to if I go to my E folder, every time you create a set of disclosures, it's going to be saved in the E folder as a pre-disclosure order. So if you ever needed to review, what did I send out? All pages are right here in the E folder. I mean, if you wanted to look at one document specifically, I could say, hey, let me look at the good faith estimate. There's a good faith estimate. Let me look at the acknowledgement. So it keeps a record of all disclosures that have been sent out. And it is titled as pre-disclosure order. So as the agent, I've completed the application, I've ran pricing, I've qualified the deal through automated underwriting, I've qualified the deal through Mavent, I've locked the loan, I've sent disclosures to the client, and now I need to request paperwork from the client. So I'm going to send out a very simple request. Is this significant to what you guys would be doing?
I don't know.
So it's a couple minutes to cover, so
Okay.
we'll just cover it to be safe. So clients, I need to get their paperwork back from them. You know, we can't just write loans without pay stubs, tax returns, things like that. So real quick, to request items, we go to the E folder. And there's a button that says request. That makes sense. So I'm going to hit request. How do you think I would go about adding a new request?
The plus sign.
Plus sign, absolutely. The plus sign will always add something. And what this plus sign is saying is, you're going to ask for certain documents. Where do you want them to go? Well, we want everything to go to the shelf file. And I'll explain shelf file here a little bit more in depth shortly, but everything goes to the shelf file. All of the borrower documentation that I'm going to request is going to the shelf file. I'm now going to hit send. Once I hit send, it's going to create a templated email that says, hello Mr. Borrower, thanks for working with us. We're excited to do business with you. However, I'm going to need the following paperwork. this is where we will tailor the message to make it the appropriate request. So we're working hard to process your loan application, however we need additional documentation. Do any of you know what a shell file means? Do you think borrowers know what a shell file means? No. So what we need to do is say, I need 1 month's pay stubs, I need recent bank statements, I need 2013 W-2, and copy of mortgage statement. So right here,
Is that accurate information usually? From a knowledge?
yeah, for most loans you're going to need copy of mortgage statement, a copy of homeowners insurance, and this email is all created. It's going to send it directly to the borrower, so it's from who and it's to who. It'll identify the client's name. We just have to tailor it to identify what paperwork. We then hit send, and the request has been sent out. So an agent is going to create the application, run automated underwriting, run Mavent. We're going to sell the deal to the client, make sure they want it. If they want it, we lock the loan and order services. We send disclosures, and then we send a request for documents. We've done all that. So fortunately, everything we've done to lock a loan and ask the client for more is done. We now are waiting on them to send us their disclosures and the paperwork we requested. Now, that'll be for tomorrow, or the next session. We're going to do that point on. But what I need to show you guys before we wrap it up today is mortgage insurance data entry and subordinate financing data entry. So we can get through that in time. So real quick, with this scenario, if you guys remember, we were paying off a first mortgage and a second mortgage. Well, we're going to say we're not paying the second mortgage off anymore. We want it to remain. So I'm paying off a $249,000 mortgage. I need to do something with my loan amount. We don't need $62,000 cash back. We already talked about how lenders, they don't want you taking cash out when you're subordinating. So I need to write a loan for about $255,000. So my loan amount is going to be updated right here. I'm going to say, give me $255,000. I've got a good loan amount. I now need to set up my subordinate financing. So, would you guys like me to key in a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan?
Line of credit.
Line of credit. Do you guys know the difference between the two? So, a home equity line of credit has a balance, and in some circumstances it has available credit. If I wrote a new home equity line of credit today, Randy, I can give you a $100,000 credit line. You could borrow 0 of it today. Tomorrow you can borrow 10 grand. The next day you can take the next 10 grand. A month from now you can take the remaining 80 grand. It's a credit line. You only pay interest on what you borrow. A home equity loan, if I wrote you a home equity loan, you ask me for $100,000, you get $100,000 today. So a line of credit has an available credit line in most circumstances. If someone pays it down, they can draw it back up. A home equity loan, you get all the money on day one, and you pay that loan off in 30 or 15 years depending. It's important to understand the distinction because there's certain things you do on both, and then there's one thing you do differently. So I'll show you everything that is done in all circumstances, and then I'll show you the difference between the two. It's easier to look at what we do similarly and then the one difference rather than the difference and then the similarity. So what we got to do, we got to make sure that my second mortgage is tied to the property. Already done. So we've got the second mortgage tied to the property, right? There it is. I now need to ask myself, is this second mortgage going to remain? What's the answer? If we're subordinating it,
Yes.
the answer is yes. So I need to look at this payment of $594 and I need to make sure it remains. Because this is the before and this is the after. If people, watch the debt ratios, if people forget to do this step, 36% DTI becomes 30. I mean, that could make or break. If we were at 46 versus 44, that's the difference maker. So your other financing, since it's remaining, you need to make sure the payment for the second mortgage is listed. So we've done that step. Step 1 was associate the mortgage. Step 2, make sure the payment is listed in your proposed section, 594. Step 3, and this is always done with subordinates, I have to expand the liabilities. I need to show them all to get a little bit more data. So I've show all VOLs. I'm going to click on that second mortgage that I want to remain, my $62,000 balance. If I scroll this menu down, it tells you it's a mortgage, who owns it, what's the account number, the balance, the months left. What's important is check resubordinated indicator. So I'm checking resubordinated indicator. Those are the steps that you have to do with every subordination.
This was under liability, right?
Correct. We went to show all VOL
Okay.
in the liabilities section. We selected our liability and we marked it as resubordinated indicator. So there's 3 steps that are similar with all of them. This is one of the steps. Make sure it's marked resubordinated indicator. The other step, make sure your payment is listed in your proposed section. It is. The other step, make sure you have all liens attached. We do. And here's where it gets different. Randy, I believe you mentioned, hey, let's call the first one a HELOC. So I need to find my balance, $62,809. I'm going to go to my HELOC section. There's 2 buttons, or there's 2 cells. The actual balance. And make sure it makes sense we should key in the actual balance, right? So $62,809. Let's say this was a $100,000 credit limit. So the guy has available credit, right? He's got a $100,000 credit limit. He's got a $62,809 balance. What do you think I should put in the HELOC credit limit section? $100,000. Fortunately, these items are pretty well worded, where it makes sense to key in what you should. What is the actual balance? Well, it's $62,809 per the credit report. What is the credit limit? It's $100,000. You'll now notice LTV and CLTV are different.
Oh.
So that is the data entry for a home equity line of credit. Make sure the payment is in the proposed housing payment section, right here. Make sure your liens are both attached in your VOM. Make sure that on your second mortgage liability, you have the resubordinated indicator checked. And then since this was a home equity line of credit, I had to key in 2 additional bits of information. The balance and the credit limit. Job's done.
But this happens only after appraisal, right?
This is actually something that the agent will set up, because we're going to identify to the client, hey, I noticed you have another mortgage. Is it tied to the property? They're going to say, yes, it is. And we're going to say, well, do you want to keep it or pay it off? I want to keep it. Okay, so we've asked them the balance, we know the balance, we've asked them the credit limit. HELOC is now correct.
So how does the credit limit gets numbered?
Okay, so how does the credit limit get considered? Good question. We have a document, it's called the transmittal summary. This is kind of like the main place that underwriters will work off of. On the transmittal summary, it's going to identify different LTVs. So it's going to say your LTV is 34%. And what that is your loan amount of $255 in relation to your property value. It's then going to say what is your TLTV, your total loan to value. That is going to be a combination of your first mortgage, your second mortgage balance in relation to your property value. You guys see where it says HCLTV? That is what would happen if you maxed out your credit line. So because we have a first mortgage, a balance on a second, and then lastly, extra available credit, you're currently at 42% TLTV, but if your client were to fully draw that home equity line of credit, you would be at 47%. So with HELOCs, there's 3 different LTVs. It's what's the first mortgage LTV, what's the combined balances LTV, and what would the maximum LTV be based off the borrowed credit.
And what is that CLTV?
The CLTV should be populated as 42.375, but I'm going to go ahead and chalk that one up to the QA environment. That would match 42.375, but it's alright. It may actually be that I've already deleted the, let's see. Let's see, so right here looking at my sub-financing section, okay, so yeah, that's just, unfortunately the environment didn't pick up the CLTV, but that would have happened in production. So let me show you guys how we do a HE loan. Those first 3 steps we showed, all still the same. You still need to make sure the proposed is there, you need to make sure the mortgages are tied, and you need to make sure that we marked this loan as resubordinated indicator. We will then say, what is the balance? It's 62,809. We will click this button that says sub-financing. The loan in question is not a HELOC, it's a HE loan. So you never fill out these cells. They're blank because it's not a HELOC. However, the sub-financing button, I need to say there's a $62,809 second mortgage. Watch the LTV and the CLTV. So now it's saying you have an LTV of 34 and a CLTV of 42.375. So for HELOCs, you fill out these 2 cells, the actual balance and the credit limit. If it is a HE loan, you have to fill out the sub-financing. You key in the actual balance because there's no available credit. Last thing to do on a HE loan. You have to go to the details of transaction. Encompass has an unfortunateness about it where whenever you key in something to that sub-financing button, it thinks it's a new loan. You guys see how it says 64,000 cash back? Well, that's because it thinks that it's giving a new loan of 62,809. This happened because I keyed that number into that sub-financing button, so you have to delete it. So this is going to get deleted, and now I have a better representation of my numbers. So I'm gonna kind of stop there on the data entry. We'll do mortgage insurance and with the next go around, and we'll close it out. I know it's not the most exciting stuff. What I do want to show you guys, because I believe you've already been provided with it, is we have built Encompass manuals, and they honestly cover everything. The step-by-step that I just walked you for subordination, you may forget that, a month from now. You're going to forget something. Well, if you go into the Encompass application manual, there's going to be a section on subordinations. Don't make changes. Let's look over here. Transaction details. Subordinations. Click Show All VOL. Click Resubordinated Indicator. Click the sub-financing if it's a fixed rate second. Key in that number. If it's a HELOC, key in those 2 numbers. Everything that I just covered, it shows you step-by-steps. Let me show you the overview. I went through the entire revised origination summary. It was a lot of data. It took us an hour, right? Well, this is going to walk you through step-by-step everything you need to do. Subject property. This is everything that we've covered. All the notes we've covered is all identified in this manual. So I know you guys have been provided with this. When you're building your applications in the future, if you forget something, you can reach out to me, or you can consult your manual and say, I'm in the schedule of real estate owned section. What do I do? Okay, I hit Show All VOM. I hit plus sign. I then have to associate the mortgage. So everything we've covered has a defined step-by-step process. We also have a manual built for the pricer. So everything we covered in the pricer, how to order services and lock the loan. We had to play imagination for a little bit, but in the event you selected a rate, it's going to say order services. It would then, after ordering services, product has been selected, you have 90 seconds to lock loan. You would select lock loan, and then you'd exit the pricer. So I know we're going to cover a lot of things that aren't incredibly exciting, Sometimes we lose sight of the small things. The manuals that we've built will walk you through every single process step by step. Mortgage insurance, it'll walk you through that, and it's all there for your review.
Are
So
these on Guru?
they are on Guru. You could search Encompass application manual or Encompass pricing manual. And Randy, I believe Peggy may have emailed those to you.
Send me a couple, but
Okay.
not
The
all of
pricing
these.
one and-
I'll send you all of those today.
Okay.
And if you send me the email, there were 2 items that I said please request for me. One of them was the Visio drawing.
Right.
And let me show you guys the Visio drawing real quick because it's right here. This is going to be a nice reminder because it's, hey, what do I do first? You know, do I do where is it? Handouts. Life of a Loan Visio. Do I do Mavent before this? Do I run AU? So this is going to identify all the steps that agents are going to do. You push lead to Encompass, you begin the 1003. You have to complete the authorized for credit milestone. You import the liabilities, price the loan, approve the loan, reprice it, Mavent, application completed, order services lock, send disclosures, send out the STIPS list. We did that, and then this is what we're going to kind of get into tomorrow. We're going to upload the signed disclosures. We're going to upload the STIPs. We're going to show you loan setup. Brandy's going to show you processing. I'll show you underwriting real quick. QC, we're going to skip that. We'll show you funding real quick, and then job's done. It's happy hour. So the Visio will kind of walk you through. We got to have something to keep them interested. But the Visio will kind of walk you through step by step of the process, and then the Encompass application manuals will tell you how to complete an application, how to do investment properties, how to do anything and everything. So you guys have a lot of materials there. It's just on you to review them. So appreciate your attendance and patience. I know Encompass is not an exciting topic, but it's one of the more important things we work with. So appreciate you guys sticking with me. So we'll call it a day, and then Randy will coordinate whatever day and time works well for you. We'll wrap it up. We should be able to get the next process done in about 2 hours. Probably 3 the way we're going, but
Thank you very much.
yeah, appreciate you guys' time, and like I said, thanks for the attention.
It was quite awesome.
It's hard material to work with, but we'll get through it, I promise.
Great job.
So thank you all for your time. Do appreciate it.